So Todd, you're recording and you are live, sir.
All right, fantastic. I guess we'll go ahead and get going then. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Tucson, and welcome to those of you in the Zoom audience who are joining us for our first Zoom meeting of the All Aboard Arizona Passenger Rail Summit, and we're really excited that we're able to both do a healthy, socially distanced, in-person, smaller gathering here in Tucson, but also having folks join us via Zoom. So again, welcome. And I'm going to be doing a presentation for the first little block, and then we'll move into our other presenters. But to start out with, I just want to say, I think this is really an exciting time for rail, passenger rail in particular, but rail in general. And as I go through my presentation, I think we'll talk a little bit about where we're at, the progress we're making at All Aboard Arizona, our priorities, and then I'll also launch into some thoughts on advocacy and how we can move the ball further down the field. So, and we've got a ways to go here in Arizona, but I'm excited about where we're going and how we're going to get there. So we will. We've got a lot to talk about, and again, we should have time for questions and answers at the end. I will just say that we've been very challenged during this time. And let me just introduce myself, of course. I'm Todd Liebman. I'm the president of All Aboard Arizona. And I wanted to say thank you to Roger Clark, vice president, who has coordinated this meeting and really done a fantastic job.
And as you can see, the first slide is a nice picture of Amtrak number 2 by Picacho Peak. So what can passenger rail do for Arizona? It's congestion mitigation for the busy I-10 corridor. And you know, it's not about the trains, it's about economic development. And trains are a catalyst for redevelopment. They're a catalyst for economic development. It's a game changer in the attraction of millennials and seniors that can use the train to travel throughout Southeast Arizona and the Sun Corridor cities in Yuma. And the train is the greenest form of transportation. So it's really, in this day and age where we're really considering global warming and climate change, it's an extremely valuable tool in that effort. And furthermore, the train really creates economic development that is sustainable, lasting, provides a reliable tax base, increasing tax revenue, and it's an opportunity that really is unmatched by any other public investment that we can make. So about All Aboard Arizona, and what are our priorities for passenger rail in Arizona? Well, first of all, we faced some challenges this year with regard to COVID. And it's been a challenge both for our organization and obviously a greater challenge for Amtrak. And in response to that, Amtrak has reduced the long distance network to 3 days a week. That is not acceptable, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the Southwest Chief needs to be restored to daily service as soon as possible. And the Sunset Limited needs to achieve daily service. That really is job one. And I'm going to point out something else. These efforts and these opportunities are not entirely mutually exclusive, and they don't need to be sequential. We need to be able to achieve opportunities where we can find them. So for example, if the Sun Corridor build out is the first thing that we do, and that's what's developing, and that's where the enthusiasm is, then we as an organization need to move in that direction. Again, if the Sunset Limited can be a catalyst toward getting rail service back to Phoenix and restoration of the West Line so we can start building the LA, Yuma, Phoenix, Tucson corridor, that's where we need to go. So we need to be flexible. These are not intended necessarily to be sequential, but they are our thoughts on where we go from here. So again, the first step is obviously to make all trains, all long distance trains in the Amtrak system daily, minimum, and ultimately to work for additional frequencies, but definitely daily on all routes. So again, the Southwest Chief needs to be restored to daily service. and the Sunset Limited needs to achieve daily service. And we're making considerable strides in that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Second, service restoration to Phoenix. This is really critical as well. Phoenix is the largest city without passenger rail service. Maricopa County is the fastest growing county in the United States, and this is absolutely critical to serve that growing region. And there are a number of cities in that on that route that are just crying out for passenger rail service, including Coolidge, Tempe, Phoenix, and the Walton Cutoff West line, which is the line that runs west of Phoenix to Walton, Arizona, and where it rejoins the Sunset Route, Union Pacific Sunset Route corridor. That line is in place. The right-of-way is there. That can be an ideal higher speed rail corridor. That is an opportunity that is just basically screaming to be developed. And so we need to work on that and get rail service back to Phoenix. And that's doable. There are restoration of service dollars out there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Third, we need to build on Amtrak's proposal for a new high-performance rail corridor between Tucson, Phoenix, and Los Angeles by way of Yuma. That will link a huge percentage of the Arizona's population. It will relieve congestion on the I-10 corridor, and it presents a great opportunity for passenger rail. That will really be the core, we believe, of Arizona's rail service and allow us to ultimately expand to link the northern parts of the state, hopefully by throughway bus initially, which already operates from Phoenix to Flagstaff, but build on that, maybe eventually, hopefully have rail service from Tucson to Phoenix and up to Flagstaff during the Southwest Chief Route. That's down the road, but again, this is the base that we want to build on. And then finally, build out the Sun Corridor between Tucson and Phoenix. I'm from Wisconsin, and I can tell you that the Chicago-Milwaukee corridor is one of Amtrak's most successful. Tucson to Phoenix has many, many similarities and similar characteristics to the Chicago-Milwaukee corridor. And it presents a tremendous opportunity for Arizona in improving the transportation portfolio in Arizona. So we'll start out talking about why daily service is important. In the 9 months, assuming the Southwest Chief Route is tri-weekly for 9 months, RPA has estimated that will have a negative economic impact on the communities served of roughly $238 million. The tri-weekly schedule, Jim Matthews from RPA has referred to it as a $2 billion bomb on flyover country. It's an economic disaster for the communities served. And what's ironic about it really is we know that tri-weekly trains do not save money, and we know that Amtrak knows that as well, because the Sunset Limited and the Cardinal, Amtrak's two existing tri-weekly trains, have the most challenges as far as revenue goes and ridership. So the tri-weekly is not a solution. It's pretty obvious, of course, when you consider tri-weekly trains that there's a certain amount of fixed costs. And those fixed costs spread over less departures and less ridership just creates less revenue for Amtrak. So it is not an effective way to reduce costs. And Amtrak knows this as well because they tried it before. In the early 90s, there was the Mercer report and the cuts that came out of the Mercer report, and that was a disaster for the Amtrak system. That took many years for them to recover their ridership. We know that tri-weekly trains aren't a usable service for most people. If you work, if you want to get to where you're going at a reasonable period of time, rail can be an attractive option, especially coming from a smaller community where you don't have to drive to a neighboring airport. You don't have to drive. You don't have to do the reverse drive if you're going to a smaller community or a medium-sized city. So the train can be extremely time competitive with air, even on fairly longer trips, especially if you're traveling overnight and it's convenient. But unfortunately, tri-weekly service means that frequently, if you have an engagement that you have to do in another city and you have to get there, you can't waste a couple of days or take that extra vacation time off of work. And so it makes these trains not a particularly usable service for many people, unfortunately. Connections are lost. The national system, these trains feed each other. So for example, people transfer to trains in Chicago. Somebody might travel from Flagstaff to Cleveland, Ohio. And if they're doing that, they're changing trains in Chicago. And if they have to wait a day or so in Chicago to catch the next train out, it's not realistic. This is entirely dependent on federal funding, and it really is dependent on the Senate. Amtrak has had strong support in the House, and so the Senate really has to act. And so we would urge you to contact your senators and tell them now is the time. This change should be in the omnibus bill being considered by the House and Senate right now to fund the government for fiscal year 21. We're obviously well into the federal fiscal year, which begins October 1. So we're operating on a continuing resolution now. This is a very fluid situation. We'd urge you to contact your congressional representatives, your congressperson and senators, and encourage them to fund Amtrak, reverse the cuts, and bring the frequencies back to daily. So I want to talk to you about the campaign for the Daily Sunset Limited. This is a campaign that RPA is spearheading, and we are part of, and we're proud to be part of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But the tremendous potential of the Sunset Route, which serves the Sun Belt and the Sunny West, is just incredible. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the slides. So a little bit of background, and most of you are aware of the Sunset Limited and the Texas Eagle. The Sunset Limited operates between New Orleans, Houston, San Antonio, Tucson, and Los Angeles. It serves Phoenix with a stop in Maricopa, which is about 30 miles south of Phoenix, and there is a dedicated van service, bus service that connects to the train and is arranged by Amtrak. So you can buy a ticket directly to Phoenix. That's a step in the right direction. And that is a growing area. Maricopa is a growing community, and there are opportunities in Maricopa as well. So the Sunset Limited is really two trains when it comes to Arizona, when it gets to Arizona. In San Antonio, the Texas Eagle, which runs from, is a wonderful route with a tremendous, serves a tremendous population area. Runs from Chicago to St. Louis, Little Rock, Texarkana, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and down to San Antonio. And you know, if some of these cities, if you hear the Houston, Phoenix, Tucson, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, these are the fastest growing cities in the United States. This is where the action is. This is where the trains need to be. So again, we talked about some of the cities served in Arizona. I live in Sierra Vista, Arizona. And you know, it's interesting. I frequently heard people say, why does the train stop in Benson, Arizona? And it rolls into Benson. And Benson, I think, is a city of about 8,000, very enthusiastic about rail. You know, but the train rolls into Benson, and it doesn't seem like it's a huge community, although it's a very vibrant community. But it's important to point out that Benson serves a service area of over 100,000 in population in very, very close proximity. Sierra Vista, where I live, is 30 miles south of Benson, and it's the home of the Fort Huachuca Army Base. It's the hummingbird capital of the United States. It has a thriving military population, military industrial base. It's a growing community. The area also serves the Tombstone, which is a lively tourist destination. Bisbee, which is also a wonderful. It's been frequently touted as one of the most beautiful cities in Arizona, and is a very beautiful mining community that's has a wonderful art scene, craft brewing, all different kinds of things. My point in saying this is that these small stations are a gateway to a lot of opportunity. And in this particular case, Benson is the gateway to the San Pedro Valley points. And this is also an area that no longer has scheduled air service. There was scheduled air service into the Fort Huachuca Sierra Vista Airport. That has been gone for many years now. And the train is really a key component of the transportation of this area. So again, we talked about how the Sunset Limited and Texas Eagle really serve the fastest growing region in the United States. These are a critical service. They could be Amtrak's, one of Amtrak's strongest routes. So let's talk about the case for the Daily Sunset Limited, and let's do a little comparison with the Northeast Corridor. These slides are not mine. They come to us from RPA and an RPA presentation that was made some months ago. But this shows you in 1970, the population of the Northeast Corridor, and we know the Northeast Corridor is basically Washington, New York, and Boston. And that was the population center of the United States, for many, many years. And you can see that the Sunset Limited corridor, if we're going to call it a corridor, was roughly the same population. That in 2010 changed. Now the Sunset Limited serves a dramatically larger population. And when you think about it, New Orleans, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, Tucson, the Phoenix area, Los Angeles, that's the growth. That's where the growth is in this country. 11.9% growth and change in population over the Northeast Corridor. Travel patterns vary by region. So Southwest compared to Northeast, 20% more trips, 20% further, 34% more total trips, and 61% more passenger miles. That's the kind of opportunity, that's the kind of market penetration we could get if we built up the Sunset route, the Sunset Limited route, and ran the train daily, and hopefully added additional frequencies as well at some point. So we know that the foundation for the coach business are major cities every 300 to 500 miles. And that's roughly what you see in this area. And again, it's a growing area. Even areas like Benson, for example, Alpine, Texas is another example. That is a thriving community with Marfa nearby, lively arts town. Alpine's a college town. And it's the gateway to Big Bend National Park. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, and it's served by the Sunset Limited and Texas Eagle. And and the train service has the opportunity to really be a big economic player in in making those communities thrive. And of course, Los Angeles and New Orleans have major attractions at either end, so it's a tremendously attractive route. And it's important to point out too, the passenger train serves a variety of different, an infinite number of different corridors along the route. So for example, somebody might be traveling like I occasionally have to travel to visit my son who's stationed at Fort Hood, and I travel from Benson to Temple, Texas. That's my corridor, that's my route. And that seat then can be sold for somebody traveling from Los Angeles to Tucson. And then it can be sold when I get off the train for somebody going from Austin to St. Louis. That's the amazing value of the long distance train. It supports a tremendous number of corridors and allows a wide variety of different travel markets to emerge. So how do we get the Sunset Limited Texas Eagle daily through Phoenix? Well, the first step is the Daily Sunset Limited Texas Eagle with Phoenix served via Maricopa. And Maricopa is very enthusiastic about rail service. They have plans for a beautiful depot there. And in the future, we can talk about if there's frequent train service operating up through Phoenix. Maybe at some point an additional service can serve the more southerly route through Maricopa. Because we want to support passenger rail wherever it makes sense, wherever it's feasible, and wherever the support is. we'll talk a little bit more when we talk about the Sun Corridor about station locations in Phoenix. But Sky Harbor Airport, the tracks are, and this is one of the neat things about Arizona, really. The opportunities are so great because the train tracks are in existence and go exactly where they need to go. The thriving areas of Tempe, Sky Harbor Airport, where you can have a connection to commuter rail, light rail, air service, intercity bus. You could have a multimodal terminal there that served the whole region. Very, very exciting opportunity. Phoenix Union Station. What great potential there is there. We've been in touch with folks from the warehouse district, and I'm old enough to remember Denver getting off the San Francisco Zephyr in the early 80s and running across the street to some little tavern and getting a 12-pack of beer and getting back on the train. And at that time, Lodo, everybody talks about Lodo, beautiful Denver Union Station. There's all restaurants and culture and shops and all kinds of things there. It's a happening part of town. Well, when I went to Lodo in the early 80s, that was Denver's Skid Row. So we have to remember that when we look at the Phoenix Warehouse District and we say, there's not a lot here right now, there can be a lot there, and passenger rail can be the catalyst to help make that happen. And I think it was Jim Matthews, I think it's a quote from Jim Matthews, that it's not about the trains, it's about what the trains can do. And the trains are transportation, they're economic development. They're a game changer in a way that no other catalyst can really develop those areas. But the Phoenix Union Station, warehouse district, there's room there for hopefully a maintenance facility if that was a turning spot for some trains. It's also a beautiful station which needs to be preserved, and it should actually be used for its intended purpose, which is passenger train service. And I'll just point out, and we'll talk a little more about that again during this presentation. I was president of the Historical Society back in Sauk County, Wisconsin, and I've always said historic preservation is economic development. And the French Quarter, when we look at the French Quarter, it's a wonderful tourist destination. We have to remember at one time those were just a bunch of old buildings that probably folks said, hey, we should just tear them down and build something new. Now, can you imagine the loss if we had done that? Now it's a major draw. These historic structures serve as a catalyst. Denver Union Station in Denver, for example. And Phoenix Union Station has the same potential in Phoenix. It can be a catalyst to redevelop that whole area, and tremendous opportunity. So if we upgrade the Walton Cutoff, it's about 150 miles of railroad to upgrade. But the tracks are in place. The rail is in place. The right-of-way is intact. This is a easy upgrade, relatively low-cost upgrade, and it's crying out for 110 mile an hour top speeds, which is very feasible and doable with existing equipment. And it just is a route with tremendous potential. And that would be a quick trip to LA, and also the West LA and the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs and Indio and that area, which is another growth area, tying in with Yuma, which is tremendous history. That's a town that's really also doing a lot with community development. Beautiful downtown in Yuma. They're looking at building redeveloping a old hotel there to be a depot. Very exciting what Yuma's doing. This opportunity, this corridor, just starting with getting the Sunset Ltd daily through Phoenix, could really begin the process of building that up. So opportunities. We know that Amtrak knows that the Daily Sunset Ltd Texas Eagle would be a vastly better financial performer than the 3-day-a-week service. There are funds through FRA's Restoration and Enhancement Grants Program, and it's specifically designed to initiate, restore, or enhance intercity passenger rail service. And the Phoenix line did have the Sunset Ltd did go through Phoenix. It did run through Phoenix until the late 1990s, and that is an opportunity for a restoration of service on that line. Arizona Department of Transportation has completed the Tier 1 environmental impact statement for the Tucson to Phoenix portion of the corridor. Again, we know what the costs are associated with that. You know, we'd have to adjust them for inflation, but we know roughly the cost. We know what the railroad needs to make that happen. The Walton Cutoff West line has no freight train interference because there are no trains on it currently. So this is a tremendous opportunity. And, you know, there's also the potential for freight, which is, you know, green friendly transportation from the Port of Los Angeles to Phoenix on the Walton Cutoff West line. All right, so let's talk about the Sun Corridor. The Sun Corridor is our name for the corridor between Phoenix and Tucson, and it builds on the Daily Sunset. So this is Sun Corridor, and you see Sierra Vista in the bottom. I like the fact that it's a nice large star, but the Sun Corridor actually runs from Tucson to Phoenix. But this gives you an idea of the population centers in the area. So there's 5 million citizens, 75% of Arizona's population. And by 2035, we're looking at an additional 53% population growth. Right now, sections of I-10 between Tucson and Phoenix are still 4 lanes, 2 lanes each way. That is not going to cut it. And of course, they have plans to expand that. But we all know that when you build more freeway lanes, all you really do is just increase the traffic and increase the congestion. And that's been proven again and again. So Phoenix metropolitan area, we've talked about this, largest city without commuter or intercity rail. They have a wonderful light rail system currently, or at least one that's developing, and they've got a big extension plan, and that's really exciting. The light rail, and that's one of the opportunities that we have here, by the way, is there's light rail in Phoenix that's easily accessible to intercity rail once it's developed. And in Tucson, we have the streetcar, which provides the same. In Maricopa County, again, it's America's fastest growing county, and many population centers, and conveniently served by, could be conveniently served by intercity rail, a big chunk of the area. Talk about Phoenix. All right. Oh, Amazon's second headquarters search. Well, where did Amazon decide to go? They decided to go where the transportation was, New York and Washington. Okay. And one of the things that they cited for Phoenix not even being in the running was the lack of transportation options. It was a failure by Phoenix. It didn't make the top 20 cities, and the comment was improve the transportation profile. Valley Metro Rail. It was a $2.5 billion investment, but it's a long corridor that serves a wide variety of the metropolitan area, and it's been a absolute smashing success. $11 billion in property tax increase, which is just fantastic. And that's the kind of thing that good sound transportation can do. Again, transportation is economic development. So the Sun Corridor, again, Interstate 10 corridor. It's got a huge population density and employment base. If you build rail between Tucson and Phoenix, it opens up job opportunities for people. I know we've all known families who work in 2 different places, and they try to figure out how to handle the commute. Rail can be an opportunity. I had a good friend that he loves Milwaukee. He didn't want to leave, but he works in Chicago, and he rides the Hiawatha, Amtrak's Hiawatha corridor every day to Chicago to work. The train gives him a chance to get a head start on work. He can work, or he can read a book, or get on the computer. They've got Wi-Fi. It's just an easier way to travel than the white knuckle drive between Tucson and Phoenix. And I do that drive regularly. Before the pandemic, I would go up I had a Diamondbacks ticket package. I would drive from Sierra Vista to Phoenix. And it's a long drive for a ball game, but it was worth it to me. But that is a white knuckle drive. And when I tell my friends that I believe that within 10 years, you're going to be able to get on a train in Tucson and go to a Diamondbacks game or a Cardinals game in Phoenix and get the train back the same day, they're blown away by that. And they're like, yeah, let's make that happen. So a lot of support. So again, passenger rail facilitates commerce, increases property tax values. It supports the future population density without having to build road after road after road, which is much more expensive than building the rail. And you know, I had a guy a while ago, and he said, "I like to drive. I don't want to go on the train. I like to drive. I like to stop where I want to stop. I want to go where I want to go. I like to drive." And I was like, "Hey, you do you. That's perfect, because you know what? If more people are on the train, that means your drive is going to be so much easier." So this is a win-win for the people who never set foot on the train. This is a win for them too, because their drive will be more pleasant. So high-speed rail. High-speed rail will frequently, it has its place, and it serves large metropolitan areas and in markets of 300-400 miles, 200 miles, 300, 400 miles. Basically, that's sort of its sweet spot. It's great for people traveling between two large endpoints. Unfortunately, it doesn't serve intermediate stops as well as higher performance rail. And higher performance rail is basically rail that operates at a higher speed than what we're generally used to, maybe 100, 110 miles per hour, but on really regular frequencies. So that's very reliable. High-speed rail between Tucson and Phoenix, you're looking at $6 billion, but that's probably a very conservative estimate. It's probably too low. It'll probably take about 20 years to build. You're talking about brand new infrastructure. This is not sharing tracks with a high-speed freight or any kind of freight. This is separate rights of way, except when you get into the city, sometimes it can share rights of way. But we're talking about a build out of a completely new rail system. The better alternative is high performance rail between Phoenix and Tucson. Uses existing Union Pacific right away. You're looking at about a 3-year build out, and probably about $1.1 billion to build, maybe more. But when you're looking at the comparison of $6 billion versus $1.1 billion, that's pretty dramatic. And there are some things to talk about as far as terminals go, where the terminals would be. But again, this rough proposal looks at perhaps running through Phoenix Union Station out to Peoria. Again, Amtrak is talking about developing the corridor to Los Angeles, and so that would be west out of Phoenix on the Welton Cutoff West line.
Okay, so you need to go back one. I've been watching the whole time. Your energy level is pretty good. It obviously picked up when you were talking about the Southwest, the Sunset Limited. You got more excited there. So you're gonna use my 3, 2. So step number 1, remember,
okay.
1 and 0 you don't say, but you count them in your head and then you start talking. So I can have an easier job of it. All right. So
all right, fair enough.
Okay, here you go.
3, 2. So how do we get there? Step 1, we're looking at probably a legal structure like a 3-county joint powers authority. And we're going to need state legislation to help that to facilitate the creation of that. Step 2, then negotiate with the Union Pacific Railroad and determine mutually beneficial partnerships to develop that. And step 3, talk about where our stations are going to be. Sky Harbor is obviously a natural transportation hub. Union Station, the warehouse district development, we talked about, tremendous opportunity as well. Again, Sky Harbor Station, natural hub. This gives you an idea of where it would be, and you know, again, this is the nice thing about Arizona, in that we have space out here. We have space. We're really, our area really is just the ideal place to develop rail, because we don't have to tear down buildings and smash through cities or anything like that. We've got existing rights of way, and then in rural areas we've got some space. So we've got the room to develop rail. So again, downtown Phoenix Station, we talked about the comparison with Denver. You can see the new Denver Union Station, old new Denver Union Station. It's a beautiful facility. It's the center of town. The Union Station itself is both a train station and a hotel. And Phoenix Union Station could be the same. It could be a boutique hotel with a train station, with shops, marketplace. You know, really the sky's the limit. It would be, Phoenix Union Station could easily be a destination in and of itself. So now I'm going to shift gears and give you my thoughts on advocacy. These are my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and they may make people feel a little uncomfortable. I am relatively new to the rail passenger advocacy community. I've been a member of organizations like WizARP and RPA for many years, but my first real active role was joining the board of All Aboard Arizona a couple of years ago, and then ultimately becoming president earlier this year. And so, you know, one of the things I've noticed about passenger rail advocates is the pessimism. And now is not the time to be pessimistic. And now is not the time to think small. And let me just say that if you came of age in the 50s and 60s, all you knew was dying passenger service. And that was really the pervasive environment of that time. It's important to recognize it's not the 50s and 60s anymore. And negativity in advocacy is not constructive. Times are just absolutely radically different today. Climate change is real, it's happening, and rail is really the only practical solution to a lot of the transportation needs in this country and around the world as well. Electric cars are coming, and they're going to have a tremendous impact on transportation. We all know that electric cars are limited by range when they're going to need to be charged every 200 miles or so. That means a reliable rail system can really complement electric cars. So you can rent a car when you get to your destination. You know, we've got Uber and Lyft, which are really taking care of the last mile problem. We've got some, especially in Tucson and Phoenix, we've got some emerging public transportation that's really positive. And so passenger rail can be a real complement to the electric cars that are coming, and that will change transportation dramatically. The employment situation is changing, and there are so many impacts that are happening right now. And I don't have a crystal ball, but I can certainly tell you that if you look at the statistics, the decline in salaries is really sadly impressive. When you look at urban areas around the United States, the decline in real income over the last generation is very concerning. That means that the house on the big lot in the suburbs with 2 cars is going to be the exception and not the rule. And it has to be. First of all, the planet can't sustain it. But secondly, it's not the way a lot of young people want to live anyway. A lot of young people value experiences more than they value the big home in the suburbs. And so, and their salaries aren't supporting it. So we're going to be looking at walkable, livable communities with a high quality of life and lots to do, and, you know, exciting art scene and, you know, pleasant communities, but they're going to be walkable, bikeable, livable, and hopefully connected by rail. Now the pandemic has really shown us something, and that is that telework is here to stay. Bill Gates has said that approximately 50% of the business travel is never coming back. I believe that. I think that the days of flying across the country for a 3-hour business meeting are over. I don't think you're going to see that anymore. I think those days are over. Now that we've switched completely to video, Zoom, different technologies, I just can't see corporations eagerly going back to the expense account days of the past. And so you're going to see a lot more telework. You're going to see a lot less business travel, but people are still going to need to travel. We're social. We need to see family. We need experiences. And that's where that's really rail's sweet spot. So now I'm going to get into the controversial stuff. And again, these are my thoughts and opinions and not those of all aboard Arizona. So if you don't agree with them, you've got a welcome place in our organization, and many of our members feel differently about this, and that's wonderful. And I'm glad to have the debate and the conversation about it. And I just want to say that there are no bad ideas out there. Ideas are great. I'm a lawyer, and the way lawyers test things, they debate and they argue, and the best case wins. And I've been wrong before, and I don't mind admitting I'm wrong if somebody's got a better idea. But these are the myths as I see them. And the first myth: Amtrak was created to preside over an orderly discontinuance of all passenger trains. All right, that myth is false. I don't believe it. I know many people do believe it, and that's great. And I understand that some railroad presidents like Lou Menck and Ben Biagini at Southern Pacific were promised this, but Amtrak had a lot of people who are rooting for its success. If you read the Amtrak law, it's an amazing law in that it provides a workable framework for the growth of passenger rail in the United States, and provides Amtrak with priority that our neighbors to the north via rail just doesn't have, and that's really hampered via rail's development. Amtrak does have the right of priority access, and that's really important. Also, the federal government before Amtrak had demonstrated its commitment to rail. It was kind of floundering around trying to figure out what to do, but they had made investments in the Northeast Corridor. They had financed the Metro liners and the turbo train. And no, they wasn't just limited to the Northeast. They were looking at preserving rail around the country. Of course, there was advocates that made that happen. The founders of NARP clearly had a huge role in that. People who really believed in the passenger train that were out there. There's no question about it. But again, if the federal government had wanted the trains to just simply disappear and go away, it would have been very simple to just approve all the train off petitions at the ICC, and the trains could have gone away. So I'm sticking with my position that that's a myth. The second myth: Amtrak is a failure. Okay, well, all right. If you go to Europe and you see the trains there, and you say, well, we don't have trains exactly like that here, so Amtrak is a failure. Well, that's not really a fair measure. The rail system in Europe did not go through the decline for a variety of reasons that the rail system here did, and we won't go into those. But if you compare the United States to its neighbors, Canada has a unbelievably skeletal rail system. It's virtually non-existent outside of the major corridor, and it's much more limited even in the corridor. And so Canada really just illustrates what a first world country on North America looks like with a different model. Mexico, everybody says, oh, hey, let's privatize. Mexico has one passenger train left, and privatization led to the end of what was once a vibrant and dependable passenger train network in Mexico, which is now gone. Mexico has virtually no passenger trains. Brazil has one passenger train left, from what I understand. Also, once a vibrant system, privatization destroyed that. Argentina renationalized their railways after the private operators basically sucked the profits out of them and basically destroyed them, and then the government had to take them back over, which is also a pattern. that we see in other places. And so Argentina is trying to build their system back. They have, again, trains that run a couple days a week to some places, but at least they're clawing their way back. But compared to Amtrak, it's skeletal. Australia has a skeletal system. So the myth that Amtrak, you can get on the train in New York and you ride all the way across the country to corners of the country. It doesn't serve everywhere, but you can get a lot of places by train in America, and we have a pretty decent railway system in comparison. All right, the privatization model. Amtrak needs to be privatized. Let private enterprise take over. They always do a better job. Well, let me just say I'm going to say false. There's clearly a place for private sector. And I think what you're going to see, if we have a vibrant Amtrak, a strong Amtrak, that private operators will develop high-speed rail and corridors. They will develop more high-performance rail and corridors. They will develop cruise trains that complement Amtrak. And you're seeing it. You're seeing Texas Central between Houston and Dallas being developed. You're seeing Brightline in Florida and maybe out in California. We'll see if that comes to fruition. And you see the Rocky Mountaineers are going to start service from Denver to Moab. It's very exciting. But the only way to preserve a usable national rail system is Amtrak. The privatization model that some people want to use, which is, hey, let's franchise out Amtrak's operations to private operators. That's kind of what they did in Britain. Britain tried to privatize the whole kit and caboodle. They first privatized the physical infrastructure and turned that over to a private operator, and then they franchised out the freight and passenger operations to private operators. It has been an unmitigated disaster. In very short order, Britain had to renationalize the infrastructure company, which promptly went broke, and then had to pump tons of money into the system to rebuild it. And now Britain is faced with, again, nationalizing the rest of it. And so they are basically going through and starting the process, almost not at their choice, but because a lot of these private operators are folding up, they're going to renationalize British Rail is on its way back. There are some folks are resistant to it. Privatization in Britain led to the highest rail fares in Europe and the most crowded trains in Europe. It has been an unmitigated disaster. The British people don't like it, and it hasn't been successful. Okay, privatization in Mexico. Well, the U.S. railroads went in and did what they did to passenger trains in the United States for the most part. They got rid of them. The private railroads didn't want anything to do with passenger trains in 1971. I'm skeptical that they want anything to do with passenger trains in 2020. But privatization was the end of all passenger rail service in Mexico, except for the Copper Canyon train, which still runs. And Amtrak is a brilliant national system. It includes yards, stations, maintenance facilities, a national reservation service, commissaries. And once that infrastructure is gone, it's gone. I think a lot of advocates are out there thinking that the 20th Century Limited Super Chief are just waiting in the yard, waiting for Amtrak to get out of the way and roll again. And that is disordered thinking. They are not out there. And without Amtrak, we can lose all rail service. And as an example, I'll just talk a little bit about the late great Rock Island. I rode the Rock Island, the Quad Cities Rocket, when I was a kid, and the train was actually kind of fun. It had a dining car. It was a neat service, and rode it out. I think it was 1974, 75 with my dad. I was a kid, but I still remember that trip. It was a neat trip. We spent the night in Rock Island. And that train was discontinued in 1978. And now they're just talking, they might get rail service back now, 40 some years later. They just might get rail passenger service back. That is the danger. Once it's gone, once these trains are gone, they are gone. They're not coming back easily. It's not easy to just start over from scratch again, because once those yards and facilities are gone, they're gone. That's why this is such a critical struggle, and we can't be arguing about whether the privatization thing is right or not. We've got to try to build up Amtrak first and then take off from there, in my view. And again, how much cheaper, that Quad Cities rocket and Peoria rocket, if we had just subsidized that, it would have been a small subsidy to keep those trains running. And we would have had 40 plus years of good transportation between Chicago and the Quad Cities and Peoria if we had kept the Rock Island running. And the discontinuance of those trains was just a really unfortunate situation. All right, Amtrak is a huge drain on the federal budget, so there just isn't any money for rail. And every time somebody talks about rail on some of the websites I'm on and the social media platforms, somebody says, well, it would cost $200 million to rebuild that. And oh my God, that's so much money. We'll never get that kind of money. That's impossible. The Amtrak budget in normal years is a rather small $2 billion. And a large freeway interchange can easily cost $1 billion. So basically, Amtrak is roughly 2 large freeway interchanges, in an annual cost. And you can imagine how many large freeway interchanges there are throughout the United States being built every single year, one being rebuilt here and there all over the country. And for that $2 billion, we get a national rail system and the tremendous economic activity that it generates. The transportation budget is $83 billion. As you can see, $2 billion is a small part of that. It should be bigger. We should have more trains, and we can afford more trains. And Amtrak's fare box recovery during normal times is excellent, over 95%, and was going to, their revenues were getting close to 100%. Profit should not be the goal of Amtrak, but certainly the investment that we make really generates a huge amount of economic activity for a very small investment. And finally, I would just point out that in the scheme of the federal budget, the Amtrak budget isn't even worth arguing about. It's a drop in the bucket. It's minuscule. And so, and I think most politicians, Republicans and Democrats, both realize the Amtrak budget truly is not even worth arguing about. What do we need to do going forward? Well, we've got our work cut out for us because we have got to build relationships with partners. We've got to build relationship with transportation interests, tourist destinations, historic preservationists, economic development districts, environmental groups. I mean, we've got a case to make for passenger rail and the environment. Business interests, from bike shops to Amazon to Caterpillar. And I just point out Caterpillar employs, I believe it's 700 people in Tucson. They've got their Southwest headquarters in Tucson. And the Amtrak station is easily linked to the Caterpillar headquarters via the streetcar, the beautiful streetcar that Tucson has. And going in the other direction is the University of Arizona, which is another focal point. So the Tucson station downtown Tucson's a fantastic destination. We need to get out there and appear before city councils and county boards and get resolutions of support. And we're doing that. All Aboard Arizona has gotten resolutions of support from many communities: Flagstaff, Winslow, Yuma, Douglas, other communities. And I'd point out too that Douglas is an offline community. But don't hesitate to go and appear before your city council and get a resolution of support. Just because you're an offline community doesn't mean you can't get that support. We're very hopeful Sierra Vista is going to pass a resolution shortly. So get out there and appear before your county boards and let them know about passenger rail. You'll find that a lot of them never really thought about it, but when they hear about it, they get excited about it. And communicate those resolutions to state legislators and congressional delegations, because they know they respond to folks at the local level. And this has got to be grassroots. We got to build this from the ground up, and exploit opportunities when they arise. If you get a chance to talk to somebody about rail, and somebody's got a good idea, somebody's got an economic development opportunity, think about how rail can play into that opportunity. So let's talk about IMPLAN. And this is our matching fundraiser for RPA's IMPLAN. RPA needs to raise $35,000 to help complete an economic impact study to restore the Daily Sunset Limited service. They've raised $13,463 to date. We are offering a $4,000 match. So all aboard Arizona, if you donate to this and go to our website and donate and designate it for the Sunset Limited M-Plan tool, we will match it dollar for dollar until we reach $4,000, which would be $8,000 then for M-Plan. And M-Plan is a computerized tool developed by the Trent Lott Institute at the University of Mississippi. And it allows us to go to these communities and say, hey, this is what rail means to you. Hey, if you had the Daily Sunset, guess what? This is the kind of economic development your community would have with increased rail. At a frequency, hey, this is what it would look like. It allows us to do a lot of modeling and actually get the data and the facts to present to these communities. And when that's what we really need. Again, it's not about the trains; it's about what the trains can do, providing transportation and economic development. So again, this talks a little bit more about M-Plan. And again, we're hoping to raise ultimately at $8,000 for M-Plan. We've got some gifts in this regard, and they allow us to do this this match. So we're excited about this. And with the new administration coming into office and a new Congress, now's the time. And I just point out that Seth Moulton has been advocating for a national high-speed rail system. There is legislation working its way into Congress that's going to be introduced in the future. And this is really a tremendous time for us to get rail going. Oh, so this is one of my favorite slides, and this is one of my favorite parts of the presentation. And so I wrote what was and can be again. This is the train station, Baraboo, Wisconsin, at some point in the early 1960s. That is the Rochester 400 leaving town on its way to Madison and Beloit and Chicago. And Baraboo, I lived in Baraboo for almost 24 years. I was the county corporation counsel for Sauk County. And it's a lovely community if you've ever been there. There's a river that flows through town. It's in the Baraboo Valley. Devil's Lake State Park is close by. Circus World Museum is there. It's the birthplace of the Ringling Brothers Circus. And it was a big railroad town at one point. That station, as you can see, is quite large, and it was built as the division headquarters for the Madison division. You can see the kids. One of them was carrying a fishing pole. Probably, I suspect this is early afternoon or mid-afternoon. I'm suspicious that it's an autumn day. You can kind of see the colors, the leaves turning colors in the distance. It has that kind of early autumn, late summer look to it. The kids are either coming from fishing in the Baraboo River and heading home, or maybe they're headed for the long walk to Devil's Lake. It's about a 2-3 mile walk out to Devil's Lake. They might be headed out there. You can see the REA truck pulled up, and you can see people standing on the platform. The train just came in, and it's an event. It's an example. Baraboo is an example of a walkable, livable, pleasant community. Fortunately, it doesn't have rail service, and I lived about 5 blocks to the right of this picture, and I worked about 5 blocks to the left of this picture. And when I would walk to work, which was not infrequently, I'd walk right past that station, and I loved that station. But unfortunately, when the passenger service pulled out, the railroad sold the depot, and it became a warehouse. They tore down the train shed that you see there, the canopy, and it was just basically a brick hulk. And unfortunately, the roof was leaking. It was abandoned for a number of years. The roof was leaking, and I was like, we need to save this. I was president of the Historical Society in Baraboo, and we were really trying to save that building. And ultimately, I left. But the Historical Society now, I'm getting ahead of myself. I thought the building was going to collapse, but this is the train station this year, and the Historical Society has acquired the station, and they're in the process of restoring it. And so that will be a beautiful, beautiful building again. And guess what? People are starting to talk about bringing the trains back. There's talk about the Mid-Continent Railway Museum maybe operating an excursion train out to Devil's Lake from that station. So pretty soon the historic preservation leads to rail service, and maybe there'll be train service from Madison to Baraboo and the Baraboo Valley again. And so that's the kind of thing. Those are the synergies that I'm talking about.
So I close on a happy note. The Baraboo Depot is being saved, and I'm really glad that we're here today and getting a chance to talk about passenger rail. And my God, I'm just right at my time. I could probably entertain one question if anybody has anything. Yes.
You talked about the Sun Corridor connecting with the airport. You did mention connecting with the light rail. You discussed earlier. Why not?
Repeat the question.
Okay, so the question is basically what at the Sky Harbor station, why I didn't talk about light rail connecting to the station at Sky Harbor Airport
Sun Corridor.
and the Sun Corridor and the Tucson Phoenix, ultimately Tucson Phoenix LA corridor, and why I didn't talk about light rail connecting. And it's just because I missed it. But that is an ideal. That's absolute. The light rail's right there. Obviously, the light rail has to be part of that. I mean, that is a perfect confluence. You've got light rail, you've got the commuter rail, intercity rail. You can have it all right there at that point. So definitely, I apologize for missing that. Yes, Richard.
You just mentioned when you talk about growth, that place, was coming from nothing almost. I never heard it. I grew up in Arizona, never heard of it except as a county. But I'm just wondering, would that serve as a stop Tucson, Maricopa, Phoenix?
So
is a halfway kind of place for like Casa Grande or something.
The question is about Maricopa and how Maricopa could figure into future plans. So Phoenix, serving Phoenix, and okay, there is actually a line, I think, and the rail people in Arizona would know better than I think there was a freight line that actually connected Maricopa to Phoenix. Perhaps, I don't know. In any event, it doesn't exist anymore. It's out of service. I think serving Phoenix with the same train in Maricopa is probably mutually exclusive, but yes.
I think if you look at the 50s and stuff, in the days when they had 3 trains, one of them, the other 2 went through.
Yeah.
Compared to train, all the rest went through Phoenix.
That would be, Earl's right. That would be the way to continue to serve Maricopa, is that if you had enough frequencies, add the train through Maricopa. They are doing great stuff in Maricopa, and but we have to think about getting service back to Phoenix. It's a difficult. Who knows? Maybe we can have it all. Who knows?
From John Christoph, that question: how is AAEZ facing with the Maricopa government and Arizona Departation on their plans for Phoenix area regional rail?
Well, I know Tony had those contacts and was working with them. And in fact, the Arizona representative that's working on projects recently did a presentation to Colorado, and we watched that. There is not a lot of movement, unfortunately. So we've got some challenges, but COVID, COVID has kind of dampened a lot of that, and we're going to be very reliant. I think once things open up again, we're going to be able to take our dog and pony show on the road and get up there. And right now we're forging some of those alliances with with various groups, and we're going to keep doing that. But that's basically, unfortunately, right now, we have not done as much as we would like to do. And so that's an area we've got to continue to work on. Well, great. I will make way for the next speaker. I thank you for your attention and the opportunity to talk this morning on issues of passenger rail.
Guys, we're going to take just a second to get everything squared away and to get our next speaker on. So if you need to go get some coffee or something, please do so. But just give us a minute. We'll get Mr. Ray Lang lined up next.
John, are you ready for me to speak?
Yes, sir. You go right ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate the invitation to speak to your organization today, and appreciate the work that you do for intercity passenger rail in the United States. It means a lot. I'm Ray Lang. I'm the when I was invited to this, I was the Senior Director of State Government Affairs for Amtrak based in Chicago, and I was responsible for Amtrak state government relations all over the country, and I had a small staff that assisted with that. As of about 5 weeks ago, I've now been promoted to Vice President of the State Supported Services line in Washington, DC. And so I have a very long commute to Washington, DC. I'm going to keep my home here in Chicago, but very long commute to Washington now as I'm taking over the State Supported Business line for Joe McHugh, who retired in November. I want to talk to you, I guess, a little bit about where things are with Amtrak, and then talk about sort of our hopes and dreams for Arizona, which I think you will find pretty relevant. And I'll just start by addressing the obvious. I mean, we're in the pandemic here, and 2020 has been a very, very difficult year for the corporation, as you might imagine. Bill Flynn took over as CEO on March 1st of this year officially, and we had just finished two things. We'd finished 2019 with record ridership and revenue, and had gotten our operating loss down to under $30 million, which is pretty amazing because when I started with the company in 1994, our operating losses were close to $1 billion. And so we'd really projected that in 2020, we were going to have an operating surplus for the first time in the corporation's history. And a lot of people worked really hard to get the company into that position, and it was really quite exciting. I mean, most of my career I'd spent, in government affairs and working with Congress to try and secure, federal funding, and it was always a battle. And so we were very proud of the achievements that we were making. But and we'd finished February with an all-time record ridership level for February too. So we were really on pace for a very good year through the first 5 months. And really on March 1st, the world kind of fell apart. Bill took over on the 1st, and in talking to him, he has a great sort of assessment of what happened. By the 8th of March, our ridership was year-over-year ridership was down 25%. And by about the 15th of March, just 7 days later, we were down over 50%. And I think by the 21st of March, as he says, just 6 days after that, we were down about 80%. And by April 1st, we were down 97% year over year in terms of ridership and revenue. The bottom had really fallen out of Amtrak's ridership. We would carry about 110,000 a day, and we were down to 3,000 or 4,000 a day. In fact, we had several days in April and early May where we had more employees on some of the trains than we did passengers. It was not uncommon to see that. We're pretty aggressive on the Hill. We have a very good government affairs department. And as you all know, there was Congress took some quick action early in the pandemic to address the national crisis. And we had spent a lot of days late in March and early in April really talking to Hill staff every day about what our needs would be, given the fact that the bottom had really fallen out of the ridership and revenue for the corporation. And we were successful in getting a pretty good funding number in the stimulus bill that in the CARES Act that was passed. We got, I think, $1 billion, $1.04 billion, something along those lines, from the CARES Act to sustain the company through the fiscal year, through October 1st. And the condition that came with the CARES Act money was that no furloughs. It was, Congress was pretty intent that there'd be no furloughs of any employees during the fiscal year, during the rest of the fiscal year, which was very good and honorable, and it was the right thing to do. And so in accepting the money, we agreed not to furlough anyone. The corridor itself had been, we basically, within just a few days, of the pandemic being declared, we shut down the entire Acela product line, and we're really just running a Saturday schedule on the conventional corridor trains. Most of our state partners shut down most of their service. Some of them shut down all of their service in March. But they in accepting the CARES Act money, though, they couldn't have us furlough the employees associated with those trains. So we didn't furlough anyone for the year, and we kept the entire long distance network running through the summer and into October 1st to really serve as an essential role, or the essential transportation function that business line serves. So it was a good thing to get the company through the year and keep the employees on the payroll, and I'm really quite proud of that we didn't really lose the skill set and the institutional knowledge that the Amtrak employee base has. Shortly after the stimulus bill passed, the CARES Act passed, we continued the daily conversations that we had with Hill staff, and they continued on through April and May. And it was very clear in the meetings that senior leadership had done with congressional representatives and our discussions with staff that we made it clear that at the end of the fiscal year we thought we were going to need a bigger appropriation than we'd initially asked for 21. And it was the Hill staff, in virtually every conversation that we had, or certainly that I was part of, they said, look, there's no free ride here. You're going to have to exercise some form of self-help to help get through next year too. You're going to have to be pretty aggressive. We want to help, but you're going to have to be pretty aggressive. So we put together a request in May, late May, that we sent up to the Hill for an additional $1.5 billion of funding for 21. Now, in February, we'd sent up our Legend grant request for 21 for $2 billion. So the $2 billion plus the $1.5 billion would be $3.5 billion for FY21. And in that was $500 million in self-help, post October 1st self-help, which was furloughs of employees, and also the decision to go to tri-weekly on the long distance network. So that went up to the Hill in late May, and then we began to work with the Hill, and it was like June, July, and August, the Hill staff, and in September on the needs. We got through the House and the appropriations bill. The House began to talk about the FY21 appropriations bills in July, I believe, and we got through the House with much more than we'd asked for. We got through the House with $10 billion. The House Appropriations Committee marked us up for $10 billion and had language in there about no more furloughs and no reductions in frequencies in the long distance networks. So we felt really pretty good about the direction we were going. You ask for $3.5 billion to get 10. That happens every day, right? So we felt pretty positive, at least on the House side. But there was no action on the Senate side as the year went on. And come October 1st, just before October 1st, the government passed a continuing resolution to fund it at the levels it was funded at the start of the previous fiscal year. So the continuing resolution goes through next week. It goes through December 11th, I believe, and funds us at a prorated level of part of the $2 billion. And as you all know, on October 1st, then we began the process of reducing service on the long distance trains, and we phased that in over the course of the month to allow for the bid and bump process for the employees to play out. So where does that leave us now? We're 2.5 months into the stimulus. Into the fiscal year. The CARES Act funding has all been exhausted, and we had a pretty good estimate of how long the CARES Act funding would last, and it's been exhausted now. and we have started the furlough process. The funding that was set aside for the state supported services those were dollars that were meant to go through the calendar year. The $239 million were meant to take the state services through the calendar year. And we will get through December 31st with the money that was available to make up for the lost revenue of the state supported trains. We'll actually probably have about 20 million left over. So that money will take the state services through January. Was just on the call 2 days ago, and we're projecting, I think, that will help the state services through January. So our estimates, I guess, at the beginning of the pandemic were pretty good for where we would be, but we don't yet have, there's no one has a bill for 21. So we've been working, again with Hill staff really every day, projecting our needs for the fiscal year. And the appropriators now have asked, what's a realistic number for Amtrak for all the state supported services and for no frequency reductions on the long distance trains and bring everybody back. And so the number really that we're asking for the fiscal year for 21 is 4.9 billion. And that allows us to preserve, everything that we have, run a full slate of trains, and bring the employees that have been furloughed back, off the street and back to running trains. So we saw that there's another stimulus bill floating around, and there's a dollar figure in there of about $1 billion for Amtrak in a HEROES Act, if you will. That is not the appropriations bill. That is really a stimulus. So if we get funded at the $2 billion level and there's $1 billion stimulus, you can do the math. That still leaves us short of what we need for the year. And so as these are trying times because there's really very limited revenue and limited ridership. We we're going to really have to we'll see what language is in the bill. We haven't seen any language in the appropriations bill that is floating around, but we'll probably have a much clearer picture next Saturday in terms of A, is there going to be another continuing resolution, and B, is there a stimulus? So that's kind of where we are. During the course of the summer, we had a management buyouts because we really needed to begin to right size the company as we projected that the pandemic would really take years to recover from. And so, there's another 180 management employees that were let go. There was a buyout and then a RIF that came as a result of that, a reduction in force. And so I lost several people that was very, one of my work colleagues that I was very friendly with, including the vice president of the government affairs department who took a buyout and retired, Joe McHugh. And that was why the company has elevated me into that role. And so, it's certainly a challenge, but a challenging role. But I'm really excited about the opportunity to really work with our states and help them restore and grow their services. So that's where we are on the federal front in terms of funding and sort of what the company's facing for the next fiscal year. I think it is going to be a long, slow recovery, but I have no predictive powers. But we are anticipating that it will take several years to get back to where we were last February 29th of approaching having an operating surplus and record ridership and revenue. But love to achieve that one day. I want to talk to you now a little bit about what I think you're all aware of, and that is our hopes and dreams and vision for the company and its growth opportunities around the country in the next several years. If you looked at a map of our system in 1971 and you looked at the map of Amtrak today, it's really not too much different. Certainly we have much more corridor service, significantly larger set of corridor trains around the country, in Southern California, the Northwest, and North Carolina and Virginia and the Midwest too. But the map where we go doesn't look too much different than it did in 1971. In fact, it's probably a little bit lighter in terms of the cities that we serve. And, that's kind of a problem. I mean, the population has shifted pretty dramatically in the last 50 years. significant population growth in the southeastern United States, in Texas, in Arizona, where you are. Our route system hasn't really followed the population trends in the country. We have, as you know, very limited service in Florida, very limited service in Texas. We don't serve Phoenix. We don't serve Las Vegas, Columbus, Ohio, Nashville, Louisville, Wichita. Those are some pretty big markets that we don't serve. And then there's cities like Houston and Atlanta, which have either less than daily service or just one train a day. It's it is a serious problem for us. And you might have heard some quotes of me speaking. I think I spoke in September at a forum like this to the national organization that you're members of. And I'd said something to the effect that, if you're not growing, you're dying. And, there's truth to that. If, you're not growing at the same rate of the population trends in the United States, you're really falling behind. Again, that's a problem. I mean, if our ridership, as good as it is, if it's not growing at the same rate of the population, I think that there's some scary things that you can read into that. So knowing that we get authorized from the federal government through the Surface Transportation Bill about every 5 years, we've looked at, we have really looked at FY20 as an opportunity for us to begin to address that growth. How do we grow? The real reason we've had such a hard time growing over the last decade or so is because the cost of starting new trains is prohibitively high. The amount of upfront capital that's required to invest in the freight railroads, the privately held freight railroads, so that they can accommodate the passenger trains has gotten very significant. You've probably seen lots of numbers out there about what is really required to start new service on the Front Range in Colorado, or what's required to start service in the Gulf Coast. There's some very, 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 very significant capital numbers associated with starting new corridor trains. So, and states, frankly, are not in a position to fund those kind of capital investments, with maybe one lone exception, and that's California, who I was talking to yesterday, their executive director of Caltrans, the rail section head of Caltrans, and he said, California is going to invest about $28 billion in rail over a 10-year period, and they're making a big bet on rail, but they're the only ones doing it. There's no other state that has that kind of money that's available. So what we've proposed, knowing that we want to grow and knowing that the barrier to entry for state-supported services is really high, we've proposed a massive federal funding program, and massive is an understatement. We've proposed $5 billion a year for 5 years of the Surface Transportation Bill, the $25 billion for the development of state-supported services around the country at 100% federal match, no local match. And we've also proposed the creation of a fund for state operating support. Somebody just unmuted. There we go.
Hello, Ray. Hello, Ray. Hang on a
Hi,
second.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I got him.
Okay, that's better. So we proposed also a grant program for state operating support too. Transition for new states, say if Arizona wanted to start Phoenix to Tucson service, and they've never funded passenger trains before, there would be funding available to help them in the first few years, Arizona DOT, in the first few years to help them transition into the starting new corridor service across the state. So guess what? We were about to unveil our plan in March or early April in advance of the Surface Transportation Bill reauthorization process, and the pandemic hit. And so we really focused at that point on the the survival of the company through the fiscal year and beyond, and but did continue to quietly talk about the reauthorization proposal to the Hill. Mr. DeFazio's committee, the House T&I committee, did indeed in July and August start the markup on the House side of the surface transportation bill. And guess what? They took everything that we asked for. We gave them, our legislative proposal for, this grand corridor growth plan, or this, let me say, a grant program to fund corridor development around the country. And they marked up the bill and gave us really everything we asked for. The creation of a grant program, which we've named the Prime Grant Program. They've created a grant program on the House side that would fund, about $5 billion a year in capital for corridor development all over the country. There's lots of other things in the bill, some really, really good things in the bill that we're supportive of too. But the big thing is, at least on the House side, they bought into our vision for funding the development of corridor trains all over the country. And this is funding which is for equipment. This is funding which is for infrastructure, for stations, and again, operating funding for transitional assistance. Again, there was no action on that in the Senate side. So, but Congress extended the FAST Act for 1 year. And wants to take up the surface transportation policy bill in 21 now. So we'll have to start over again in the House because Congress expires on the 31st and a new Congress is seated in January. But we're optimistic that we have very good support for our legislative proposal in the House. And with a guy who goes by the name Amtrak Joe, in the White House, maybe there's a good chance that we can continue the progress that we made last year and get a bill like this advanced through the Congress. And if we do, two things. That's great because it's going to change the face of passenger railroading in the United States with $5 billion a year for 5 years available to states. But we're also going to have to prove we can spend it. And by we, I mean Amtrak and really the state DOTs, that we can spend that kind of money. Because if we don't, they'll take it away. And we really think that the vision we have for corridor growth around the United States will really take about 15 years to build and get done. And so it would have to be reauthorized in future reauthorization bills. So many of you have seen the map that I showed at the RPA event in September. That was a pretty bold vision. And it's our vision for really how we would spend the money. There's nothing carved in stone in that. It's not, a legally binding map or anything like that. But it's a map that, we think reflects where we should develop corridor trains in the United States. And we know certainly that when we propose a $25 billion grant program, we have to give them something to look at so they can say, oh yeah, that does make sense. And so the map that I showed and the map that has been circulating now around the internet, I've seen it on LinkedIn, I've seen it on Facebook, I've seen it on Twitter, I've seen it on the Points Guy and other blogs, is a pretty bold map. And it has service between Nashville and Atlanta, where we'd love to go, development of corridor service in the Texas Triangle, development of service on the Colorado Front Range, service to Las Vegas from Los Angeles, service to Columbus, Ohio, lots of places like that. And for you, it has our vision for service in Arizona, which is corridor trains between Tucson and Phoenix, and then extending those corridor trains to Los Angeles. We think those are two excellent corridors, and so we've proposed a vision of establishing short distance corridor trains between Tucson and Phoenix, with some of those trains continuing to Los Angeles. We've socialized that with both the stakeholders in Southern California and the state of California, and certainly with Arizona. In fact, in advance of the start of this process, as we talked to Hill staff 2 years ago about what we were thinking about, they said, well, you better go talk to the states, because if you don't, and they're not aware of it, or you guys, your proposal is going to go nowhere, and we really need to see what the states are thinking before we would consider it. So the very first, there was probably about 5 of us that started doing trips all around the country in 2019 and early into the 2020. to meet with the big city mayors and the state DOTs and other stakeholders of the places where we wanted to grow. And the very first trip I did was to Arizona. Met with the mayor of Phoenix. It was the first meeting I did. Went with the mayor's office in Tucson. Met with Arizona DOT and some of the other stakeholders in the region to socialize the idea that we had. And then from there, we went to Los Angeles and met with the folks in Southern California to get to socialize this idea. And we agreed. We said, this is what we're thinking about. What do you think? And again, we're proposing 100% federal funding. And we're proposing, transitional operating assistance for the states. And we had those conversations really all over the country over about an 8 or 9 month period with state DOTs and some big city mayors. I did testify before the Tennessee legislature late last year about our vision for Nashville, Tennessee, which was really well received. I met with the governor personally on that. After I left town, I think there was for 3 days, there was a cover story about potential Amtrak service to Nashville on the Tennessee end, and they even had a non-scientific poll, would you like Amtrak service in Nashville? So I felt really good about that. So that's kind of our vision. We want to begin to really be aggressive in developing corridor services around the country over the next really 5, 10, 15 years through the creation of this program. We know our map is just a map. It is not, I think what will move forward, it is going to be up to the state transportation departments to really decide if they want to get into this. We will encourage them, we will help them, and we will coach them, if we need to in states that don't have good service. But it's going to be up to the states. And if the states have different ideas about where they want to run trains, that's great. There's a grant program that's going to be out there for them to do that. I should also say that the grant dollars are available for existing state partners and existing routes, and the states could, the existing states could apply for and receive those capital grants to upgrade their current service or binding equipment. And I think in the early years, they'll be in a better position to do it than states that don't have a history of running passenger trains. So we're excited about it. As I said, we're through the House, and I think we'll get through the House again next year, and we'll see. We'll work as hard as we can to advance this through the Senate and hope that the bill that we've seen progress already will stay intact, and we'll have a national policy for the development of passenger rail across the United States. So that's what I really wanted to talk to you about today. I might have missed some things, but I think it was pretty comprehensive. And I did want to sort of let you know where the company is as a result of the pandemic, but then I talk about vision for the future. So John, if you want to, I saw some questions that were coming in across my screen, but I've lost them. And so if you wanted to read what the questions were in the chat, or
they're probably available if you click on chat. You can probably scroll to the bottom and see the questions. And what I'll do is take one of my portable pads around and allow anybody in the room to ask a question directly to you while you review those chats. Is there any questions here? Oh, there's one from the president. Hang on.
okay.
I don't know if this is going to. Oh, yeah. See. Hold on a minute here. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, Ray. Todd Liebman, I'm the president of All Aboard Arizona.
Okay.
There'll be a little echo, just ignore it.
I'd like to know what we can do down here to facilitate that vision of the Tucson, Phoenix, LA corridor. What could we do to assist and help with that?
Sure. Thanks. That's a great question. I appreciate that. It's kind of you start me off with a softball. I always appreciate the president starting me off with that. Look, I think Arizona DOT, when we met with Arizona DOT, said, look, this is great. They kind of started off the meeting. Hi, how are you? FYI, we have no money. So, well, no big deal. We're not asking you for money, but we're going to propose this. And, if it comes to be, would you be interested? Yeah, absolutely. We'd be interested if it's structured the way that you would like. So there is interest there. The mayor's offices in Tucson and the mayor of Phoenix, they were both very interested too. There's been a change in mayors in Tucson, so we have to re-socialize this with them. But I think what would have to happen for that really is that the DOT would really have to take the bull by the horns, Arizona DOT, and say, yeah, we're interested in doing this. We want to do it. And they're going to have to do the pre-NEPA work, you know, the NEPA work that's associated with doing this. So they're going to have to do some corridor planning, which is really looking at the infrastructure there to see what kind of capacity improvements need to be made for services. Some, you know, high-level ridership and revenue estimates, and we can certainly help on that front. But the DOT is just going to have to become engaged in that process of, you know, becoming a partner. The way the law is structured, Amtrak cannot start short distance corridor trains on its own. The PREA law in 2008, you know, basically said any train under 750 miles in length has to be funded by a state, or it goes away. And you know, that law is still the law of the land. So it's going to have to be a DOT-driven decision. We think our role is, you know, A, to advocate for the federal funding, and B, to support the DOTs in any and all work they need to do, so that, you know, they can start service. Generally, you know, the NEPA work, if you're aggressive, you can do it in 2 years, the pre-NEPA and then the NEPA work. And then the construction for these things is usually about 2 construction seasons. So I believe some of the railroad, I looked at it when I was down there about 1.5 years ago. Some of the railroad between Phoenix and, I guess, what is it, Yuma, is the right-of-way still there, but it's out of service, which is a good thing because the right-of-way is there. You know, that there's not, from what I can see, freight traffic on it. So that not having to, you know, have freight traffic on a railroad, you know, is probably a good thing for a passenger train. But, you know, the fact is it's out of service and it is going to need a lot of upfront capital to get back in condition to be used. But so there's good with there's a silver lining there. But I think that's what you could really do is encourage your DOT. I think continue to remind the big city mayors that they can be tremendous advocates for this at the state level. And, you know, so you start doing some unscientific polls on the cover of the Arizona.
Is there anyone with a question from Zoom?
Well, I'll read one here. It says, if Amtrak would start talking about growing and reorganizing rather than just cutting, there would be more support, especially from the Sun Belt. Can Amtrak stop being so focused on the Northeast corridor and start looking to the future? Where is the plan to serve the Sun Belt better? Also, how does Amtrak justify spending so much on the NC corridor when it is clear that it's a money loser? Why not create a business plan to serve Sun Belt corridors with higher potential? Examples are Charlotte, Atlanta, Houston, San Antonio, Arizona, Fort Worth, Phoenix, Tucson. Well, I think, look, I think we have, you know, proposed a plan for service in the Texas Triangle for service between Charlotte and Atlanta, and, you know, on the Texas Triangle in Phoenix to Tucson. Those states that you're talking about there have not really been aggressive in developing passenger trains around the country. I'm sorry, have been aggressive in developing passenger trains on those corridors. Texas does fund a portion of the Heartland Flyer, but that's it. And you know, it's the state of Texas's entire exposure to passenger rail is about $2 million a year. While North Carolina has good service and a very good program between Raleigh and Charlotte, they do not. The South Carolina DOT and Georgia DOT do not fund service, and you know, there's a learning curve there, and there's going to have to be some work in developing corridor trains on that corridor. Phoenix, Tucson, as I said, the state does not currently fund service there. So I really think that the business plan, I mean, we can help them with, but the way the law is structured, the state DOTs really have to be the lead entity, because the law does not allow Amtrak to start trains on our own. They have to be funded by a state under a state contract. And that is my business line. I now run the state supported services business line, which, by the way, is 50% of the company's ridership. So last year in 19, it was 16 million passengers were on a train funded by a state. And so, you know, I have really half the company's commercial plan now. So the next question was Nashville, Chattanooga, Atlanta is another great corridor. I guess it's a comment. Yes, it's wonderful. It really is. And Atlanta would be just a fantastic market to have as sort of a hub. If we could have, you know, Atlanta and Nashville service, and Atlanta to Charlotte service, and Atlanta and Macon, Savannah, that would be great too. Another question, is Amtrak working with Riverside County and others in Southern California plans funding infrastructure upgrades on the UP Sunset route through San Gorgonio Pass in the Coachella Valley. This is great. Well, I get the question is about, are we actively promoting, or do you have plans in place for that corridor service really between LA and Phoenix, other than the conceptual plans that we told to the states? No, we don't have any work going on there. And again, we will need the state DOTs to really be aggressive in this grant program. I think will certainly allow them to do that. Why can't Amtrak lead on coordinating these corridors across states? It is incredibly discouraging for Amtrak to say it is all up to the states. Well, the law under PRIA is clear, and it says that any train that's under 750 miles in length has to be funded by a state, or it would go away. And when that law was passed, quite frankly, we were really pretty nervous as a corporation about what that could potentially mean. There were a number of short distance corridors around the country that were at great risk. New York State there were several trains that we inherited the day we were founded in 1971 that were impacted by that law. Everything in upstate New York between New York City, Albany, and Buffalo was at risk unless the state decided to pick it up. The Philadelphia to Harrisburg service was at risk unless the state of Pennsylvania would agree to pick it up. Most of our service in Virginia was at great risk. All of the service in the Chicago to Detroit corridor was funded, was funded through Amtrak's appropriation. That was at risk. Some of our services on the West Coast in California were not funded by the state. On the Los Angeles corridor, they were funded by us. All of those are at risk of that law. The remarkable thing to me about the PRIA law, because I was really concerned about the future for corridor trains, was that at the end of the day, by 2013, which was when that provision took effect, every single short distance train that was impacted by this law was picked up by a state. There's a lot of hem and haw and frustration about the federal government turning over the responsibility for those trains to the states. But at the end of the day, every single short distance corridor train at Amtrak was funded by a state. It was a hard time. I spent 5 years traveling the country, testifying before state legislative bodies about what the law meant and encouraging them to pick it up. But we got through it and we didn't lose a train. Now, Indiana eventually decided not to fund the Hoosier State, which was a real blow because they worked hard on that. But other than that, we preserved every service. And unless that provision of law changes, the only way we can start new trains is through a written contract with a state government or a non-Amtrak entity for short distance corridor service. So I don't know, John, if you have more questions in the audience, or you want me to just scroll through these?
Well, in the interest of keeping ourselves on our agenda, I suppose did you check the chat line to see if there were any other questions? And are there any other questions in here? Inside here, apparently everyone is quite satisfied so far, which
Okay.
I think is amazing.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions here. I'll just pick a few.
Well, let's see if we
Congress amended the 2008 Act
10 minutes.
to redefine the short distance line as being less than 500 miles. Yes, Congress could do that. Absolutely, Congress could change that length. There's only a couple of trains that would be impacted by that, and that's really the Carolinian, which is 748 miles in length, and that's why the bill was written that way, I believe. But 500 miles is not really going to change what I think the author of this question is really is getting at. And so, but Congress could certainly do that. So when will Julie become bilingual? It's a great question. I don't know. Julie, we were real pioneers with Julie. We were, I believe, the first in the transportation industry to have Julie voice-enabled, or voice-enabled call center. And it was wonderful. Everybody has it now. But yeah, that's certainly the next level of stuff going on. There's some really cool things going on the app. I hope you all have the Amtrak app on your phone. But we've started to accept PayPal, payment through PayPal now. Lots of other really cool stuff like that are going on in the app. We have Richard brought in quite a few of folks from his career in the airline industry, and a couple of them are really that I work with. I've been very impressed with the app and the architecture, in the back of the house of the app. And so, if you don't have the app, please download it. There's a whole lot of really cool things in the app, and I assume most of you do. It's about 50% of our tickets are sold through the app now, and there's just some really cool things coming in ticketing in the next few years that I'm excited about. So, I think I'm kind of out of time here. So, John. Unless you have anything else you want for me to talk about it, and I'll let you get back on time.
Well,
Can I make a comment?
glad
This
we
is,
finally figured it all out, Ray. Go ahead, Jim.
I just want to very quickly say that I appreciate the comments about the big cities being advocates. I want to let you know that Flagstaff, where I'm on city council, we have definitely been advocating with congressmen and senators about support for Amtrak and 5-day-a-week service through Flagstaff, Chicago to LA. And what really surprised me is a lot of the really smaller towns along that aren't even on the route, like Cottonwood, which is south of Flagstaff on the way to Phoenix, and Winslow. They're also very interested in maintaining service from Chicago to LA. So anyway, we're out there. If there's anything we can do to advocate, please give us a call. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment. I appreciate that, and I did see the correspondence that came in over the summer, and the resolutions from the city of Flagstaff. So thank you for your support. Yeah, I mean, when we went to tri-weekly on the long distance trains, we did two things. We created a series of metrics that would help us determine when there's enough demand to bring them back. But we also pledged, that they would come back post-pandemic, and certainly no later than the end of, we thought the end of this fiscal year, unless the pandemic somehow continues. My hope and here is that we'll go back to daily service, either through the end of the pandemic or through funding being provided for daily service from the Congress of the United States.
It's been requested by the president to get a comment on the sunset going daily, Ray.
Yeah.
And that'll have to be your last answer and solution.
Yeah, I mean, there's only two pre-pandemic. There were only two tri-weekly trains in the Amtrak system. It was the Cardinal and the Sunset Ltd. And we've done the studies over the years to look at what it would take to go daily on both of those routes, because I think daily service is really the best way to go. On the Sunset, because of its really significant length, it requires a lot of extra equipment to get the extra equipment sets out there so you can go daily. And then, on the infrastructure side, you have to work with the host railroad, which in this case is Union Pacific, to build the extra infrastructure that they believe they need for, the 8 more trains a week. But I think two things I would say that the corridor grant program can be useful for making those kind of infrastructure improvements. And, we're also being very aggressive in our request for funding for new equipment. We hope to put ourselves in a position to have the kind of equipment that daily, and we hope to have the kind of capital funding available to help make infrastructure improvements to support that.
All right, well, Ray, thank you very much. And I appreciate that we managed to figure out how to use this modern technology so that you could finally visit with us. And so now we're going to transition to our next speaker, who is Mr. Al Runte. How do you say your last name, Al? Let me.
Thank you. And I'm going to sign off.
See you later. Thank you, Ray.
Bye-bye.
Runte, R-U-N-T-E.
Runte. Okay. Well, there you go. So you're from All Aboard Washington. So take it away, sir.
Well, I'm not really from all aboard Washington anymore. It's a long story that Chuck can tell you, but I certainly am from the bowels of history. In fact, I'd like to start this morning by showing you that I really am in Arizona. This lovely chromolithograph off of my shoulder is Thomas Moran. It's the Grand Canyon from Hermit Rim Road. It was commissioned in 1912 by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway
because the railway had just completed a road from El Tovar west to Hermit's Rest. And Thomas Moran was commissioned to do this beautiful chromolithograph of Arizona. So if I want to go to Arizona when I'm doing my writing here in my office, all I have to do is spin around in my chair and there I am. I'm in Arizona. So I'm very much with you this morning in the state of Arizona, which is one of my favorite places. And not to do too much plugging here, but if you good people have not yet been to La Posada in Winslow, on the route of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, the old Harvey House built by Mary Jane Coulter in 1929, you're missing out. So get out to Winslow and visit La Posada, the good folks up there doing historic preservation. And I couldn't agree with Todd more that if we did more with historic preservationists, we might have better rail passenger service in the United States of America. A little bit on my background. A lot of you folks know me. You've seen me on PBS, probably seen me on Ken Burns and Dayton Duncan's marvelous series on the national parks. I was an advisor to that, and I spun the railroad tales there about how the railroads developed our national parks. I am the author of Trains of Discovery, Railroads and the Legacy of Our National Parks. I'm sure a lot of you folks have that. And I'm also the author of Allies of the Earth, Railroads and the Soul of Preservation. And this beautiful painting was commissioned by Chuck Mott. So I'm sure that you good folks also have that. So what I would like to do here this morning is remind you as a historian of what the problem is with Amtrak in the year of our Lord 2020. It's not the lack of funding. It's not the lack of planning. It's not any of those things. What the problem is that we have simply forgotten the history, and Amtrak continually makes us forget the history. Stop and think. When we began this campaign, it was 50 years ago. Alfred Runte was all of 19 years old in 1966 when he went down to Scranton, Pennsylvania to testify in the Interstate Commerce Commission hearings against the discontinuance of the Phoebe Snow. He was all of 22 years old when he took the last train, the Lake Cities Express, from Chicago, Illinois to Binghamton, New York. 2 weeks later, it was gone, and there hasn't been a passenger train in Binghamton or Scranton. Joe Biden tells us he loves Scranton, but he hasn't given them a passenger train now in 51 years. So here I sit at the age of 73, 50 some years into this campaign. If I had been an abolitionist and started in 1810, it would be at the eve of the Civil War. If I had been a suffragette and started in 1870, now 1920, it would have been a 50-year campaign. I would have started at the end of the Civil War. What is that statement by Albert Einstein? When we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, that's the definition of insanity. We've been doing the same thing over and over and over again now for these 50 some years. And what do we get? Insanity. So I hate to disagree with your distinguished president, but when he says that Amtrak was not meant to fail, oh, but it was meant to fail. It was meant to fail. It was meant to be gone within 5 years. I've read the documents. I've talked, interviewed all the major players from Claiborne Pell of Rhode Island, who wrote Megalopolis Unbound, all the way down the list. Oh, it was, yes, meant to succeed somewhat in the Northeast corridor, but it was not meant to survive as a national system. So here's why it survived as a national system. 2 reasons. The first reason was back in the 1970s, we still had a press. We don't have a press anymore. What we have is entertainers posing to be journalists. But 50 years ago, we had a press. And when Amtrak came on the scene, that press became very active in its behalf. After all, there was a new story in town to write about. Rush Loving writing for Forbes magazine, Rogers E.M. Whitaker writing for the New Yorker, Tom Wicker writing for the New York Times. Michael Fromm writing for Changing Times and Women's Day, and Alfred Runte writing for The Conservationist, National Parks and Conservation Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, the Santa Barbara News Press, and other journals. We kept the story alive. We actually said, yeah, we were on a train the other day that was 7 hours late and the air conditioning broke down and the windows were filthy and the food was lousy. But guess what? Trains are coming back, and the American public believed us because we were persistent. But even we had a great ally, and that ally was the war between Israel and the Arab states in 1973. My college buddy, Irving Reed, was on the Golan Heights in the Israeli army, in the artillery, taking bead on 600 Syrian tanks coming across the plain. And the Arabs got very mad at us. And they said, you know what? We're not going to give you people in the United States oil anymore. And that gave the Tom Wickers and the Al Runtes and the Michael Fromms and the other advocates for Amtrak a brand new weapon. And that was the fear that we would actually run out of oil sometime in the 1970s or 1980s. We couldn't get around. Santa Barbara, where I was in graduate school, had lines of cars going around the blocks of people trying to get gasoline. And Amtrak was able to take advantage of that and start doing things such as removing the 3-day operation north of San Francisco on what had been the Coast Daylight and making it the Coast Starlight. And they started to run 18, 20, and even 22-car trains of people who were worried about being able to find gasoline along the route. And that saved Amtrak. That saved it from the death knell that had been proposed. And how do I know that that death knell was still very much in operation in the late 1970s? Because I was at the home of Peter Bell when I was a National Association of Railroad Passengers board member, and Alfred Michaud, the vice president of marketing for Amtrak, came in through the front door, took one look at me, his ears turned red, his cheeks went red. He looked at me and he said, Al, will you quit it? I don't want the cowboys and Indians market. I don't want the long distance trains. We have to get rid of the long distance trains. Will you please stop it? Well, Al Runte didn't stop it. And in 1979, we crawled up Capitol Hill one more time, and we testified one more time. And I wrote this op-ed in the Washington Post. Long distance trains, potential for profit, one more time. And we saved Amtrak. And then Graham Claytor became the president of Amtrak in 1980. And we finally had somebody who understood rail and was not part of the swamp. He was a Southerner, a Southern gentleman, and he understood rail. And he said, well, if we're going to have this stuff, let's make it work. And we were able to get superliner equipment. We were able to do those things. But we forget the fight. And it was a fight. And it went on for 10 long and bitter years. And I was there, and I can tell you unequivocally that Amtrak wasn't meant to survive any of it, except in the Northeast Corridor. And once Amtrak had the Northeast Corridor, its whole demeanor changed. Suddenly, yeah, we've got trains that'll take us from Boston to Washington, D.C. through New York. Oh, who needs to be out there again in what Alfred Michaud was describing as the cowboys and Indians market? But I didn't stop, and I've never stopped since. I still believe we need a national rail passenger system, and I still believe that we're not going to have that national rail passenger system until we wake up and start doing things differently and start recognizing that after 50 years, we must be doing something wrong if still we are listening to Amtrak executives tell us that they can't do A, B, or C until they go to some state government or some local government or some mayor and find some money somewhere. This country has all the money it needs to have rail passenger service. Here in Seattle, we built a third runway at the SeaTac airport in a heartbeat. Here in Seattle, we have no problems with subsidizing all of the infrastructure behind highways and airports and all of that. It just seems that when it comes to rail, it has to be horribly expensive. and horribly inefficient, or we simply don't want it, or we don't understand it. So I'm here this morning to tell you what I would be doing if I were all aboard Arizona, or what I would be doing if I were still as wrapped up in the rail passenger movement advocacy that I was now some 40 and 50 years ago. I would be looking for a whole different paradigm. I would be looking for something totally different and something totally revolutionary and something that would get the job done. And one of the things that I mentioned in Allies of the Earth was that the corporations in this country owe us something. They are obligated as corporate citizens. We charter them. They're obligated to serve this country. When do we ever get the idea that corporations are unlike citizens? They want all the rights of citizens when they're in that when it's of advantage to them. When do we ever get this idea that the railroads of America should be free of the passenger train, that the railroads of America should have turned that over to Amtrak in the first place? They want to be big, they want to be powerful. They are now virtual monopolies and combinations and restraint of trade. When do we get this idea that they are somehow should not be part of our larger system of transportation in this country? We got that idea because we started to relieve our corporate citizens of their obligations. And we keep doing that. We do that all the time. I'm not saying that free enterprise and capitalism are bad things. They're good things. And that's what really makes this country work. But we've always had in this country the sense of obligation. And the railroads once understood that. When our railroads developed our national park system, they were on board. They were on board with the American people. They expected to make a profit. And you know what? They really didn't. But they did it anyway because they knew it was in the American interest to develop our national parks and to have a solid rail passenger system. That all began to go by the boards in the 1960s and 1970s, when somehow we got this idea in our noggins as Americans that because you're big and powerful, it's enough that you're big and powerful. That because you hire people, that's the only obligation you have to society. Let somebody else pay your taxes. Let your workers pay your taxes. We got that into our noggins because that's what the corporations began to tell us. That's what monopolies always tell us. Well, here's my challenge to the railroad monopoly. You run your passenger trains or we're going to break you up. We're going to break you back up into your original constituent companies, because when you did that and were competitive, that's when railroading in the United States of America was healthy. Oh, but we're healthy now, Dr. Runte, they say to me. We're healthy. Look at how healthy we are. Oh, yeah? You only have 16% of intercity rail travel. Only 16% of the freight that goes in this country is carried by the railroads. And if you're so healthy, why is practically every freight car in this country now covered with graffiti from end to end? If you were so efficient, how does some nerd, how does some idiot with a spray paint can get to go up to that freight car and make this big painting, this big mural along the side of it, if that car is efficiently moving on its way across the country? The truth is, we know that the freight railroads aren't all that great either. That it takes an average of 3 weeks to get a loaded freight car across this country, unless it's on a Z train going through Winslow, when it might get across the country in 3 or 4 days. But that's very specialized freight. So how about we make this deal with our railroads? You're going to take back your passenger trains and you're going to run them properly. And you're going to run them on behalf of the citizens of America. And here's the deal we're going to make with you. You give us the bill. You tell us what this cost. You tell us what it cost, every penny, and we'll pay you a guaranteed 7% profit. And we'll also take the liability, since you say that that's the reason you don't want to run passenger trains. We'll do that. We do it for nuclear power plants. We'll do it for railroads. If you have an accident, but it better not be because of negligence on your rail bed, because we'll be checking that too, we will give you cost plus 7%, and you will take back the trains. Oh, but here's another part of the deal. You're going to run 3 trains a day per route, not 1 train a day per route, and none of this nonsense with train every other day, and people begging us to have a train 5 days a week instead of 7 days a week. You're going to run us a train morning, noon, and night on every route, because we all know that the only reason that Amtrak isn't filled on every train, on every route, is because half the time the train arrives in the wee hours of the morning and nobody wants to get up and take it. So that's what you're going to do. Now, if you don't want to do it yourselves, you can subcontract it to somebody else to do it for you, but you are going to make your tracks available for 3 passenger trains a day on every long distance route, and you're going to like it because we are allowing you to be combinations and restraint of trade, and we, the American people, are sick and tired of allowing that, and we're sick and tired of all the excuse making. Now, that's called activism. Activism is to raise the level of controversy and win at it. It is not to accept what somebody tells you are the facts. It's to make your own facts and to make your own ideas and to advance those ideas. I'm not saying that I have the answer, and I'm not saying that Amtrak might not still be the answer in a lot of these corridors and a lot of these operations. But something has to happen here. I'm 73 years old, and I'm wondering why I can't go home again to Binghamton, New York on a passenger train. I never thought I'd have to wait 50 years to be able to ride a passenger train again back home to Binghamton, New York, or Scranton, Pennsylvania, which Joe Biden claims he loves and claims he's from. I never thought that I'd have to wait that long to have these opportunities. That's what it has cost us to be go along and get along. That's what it has cost us in the rail passenger community, not to be citizens that stand up and demand that these people serve us, because after all, they are our servants. And just to remind you, this is the way that I have testified in Congress. I testified in Congress quite a few times on rail passenger service, and I never let those people up there sitting above me think that they really were above me. I told them what I wanted as a citizen of this country and what I expected from them and why. Todd mentions we need to make more partnerships. We need to do more with environmentalists. We need to do more with all these other people. Well, Alfred Runte has tried it. He's been doing it for 50 years. And guess what? The Sierra Club today doesn't even want John Muir anymore because they say John Muir was derogatory toward Indians, so they're going to read him out of the party, their own founder. The people in the Sierra Club want wind turbines and solar power plants. They don't want passenger trains. The people at the National Parks Conservation did and allowed me to write about it back in the 1970s. But environmentalists don't understand rail. The press is no longer teaching rail. These things haven't happened in so long that we have forgotten, and therefore we are now finding ourselves again right back in the 1970s, begging Amtrak to do A, begging Congress to do B, begging the governors to do C, begging the mayors to do D. If only somebody else would step in and help us, we could have our passenger trains. The Europeans laugh at us. My family is from Germany. They have 100,000 daily passenger trains in Germany. They spend 16, 20, 25, 50 billion a year on upgrading their trains. When my wife and I were in Germany 20 years ago for the last time, we were taking 175-mile-an-hour trains everywhere in the country. And what is our excuse over here? Oh, well, you know, Al, we're too spread out. It doesn't work here. Well, nonsense. We're now a country of 330 million people. And you think that Amtrak needs you to tell them how fast Arizona is growing? That's not the reason you don't have those trains already. That's not the reason you didn't have a Daily Sunset 20 years ago. It's because they're used to excuses. They're bureaucrats. You as citizens have to tell the bureaucrats and the politicians what you want and why you need it and why you will not stand for anything less than what your country has to have to give you that service. I know that I'm coming on a little bit strong this morning, but you know, it's Zoom, and I always want to make sure that you guys are all awake. But let's get serious, good people. Let's get serious. Remember, we've been in this fight for 50 years, and we're no farther ahead I believe Ray said it well when he said we're probably going to have a smaller map than the map of 1971. I was there when Jimmy Carter and Brock Adams, as Secretary of Transportation, wanted to cut the system in 1979, including the Florida Limited, the Florida trains, the National Limited, and the Floridian, and all of those other good trains. And I remember how I handled it. When Alan Boyd, the president of Amtrak, said to the Atlanta Constitution and the New York Times and others that Amtrak was only losing 10% of its route miles, I was the first one to pipe in at that news conference and say, yes, but Mr. Boyd, you're losing 20% of your passenger miles. He didn't like me for it. He swore in my ear about it afterwards. Don't tell this guy that Amtrak wasn't meant to fail or to retrench in the Northeast Corridor, because it was. And then Ronald Reagan did it again in 1981 and took our North Coast Hiawatha. And there went my argument for a train to Yellowstone National Park. Don't tell me that Amtrak wasn't meant to fail. It was. There's no reason that those trains couldn't be packed. Not a reason in the world, except that they didn't want to pack them. They wanted the Northeast Corridor, and that's all they had begun to want by the late 1970s and 1980s. But thank goodness for Graham Claytor, because he at least kept the system alive for a few more years and kept it alive long enough for us to show what could be possible and might be possible if the country lived up to its potential. So don't take it from me. I'm just here as an old historian. I've spent my time in the documents. I don't believe what people tell me. I believe what they say, and I believe what they say in print, especially what they say in print privately. I've always told my colleagues I would love to read Hillary Clinton's 30,000 missing emails. I don't care what she tells me. I want to see what she said in print, because what you say in print is what you leave for posterity. You can tell anybody anything anytime. You can tell any war story anytime, but do the records prove that the war story is true? I was there at the initial fight. Many of you were there as well. You all remember it. You all remember how we struggled, how we fought, and how we continually had to reinvent ourselves to save the passenger train. And every time we reinvented ourselves, somebody got angry at us because they wanted something different from what we wanted. The airline people got angry at us because they didn't want Amtrak around to even be a glimmer of competition. The highway lobby got mad at us because they didn't even want a measly $1 billion or $2 billion a year going to Amtrak. Somebody got mad at us. Somebody told us we were nostalgic. Somebody told us we were foamers. Somebody told us we were out of date. Somebody told us yada, yada, yada. We knew better and we persisted. But now we've got to raise the stakes again. We've got to get past Amtrak. We've got to get past this company because the culture is too pervasive for it to succeed as it is now operating. We've got to get past that. And we're not going to get past that until we're bold and propose something new. And this country's got the money. We just spent something like $3 trillion to give everybody a stimulus check and to bail out the airlines. Hey, where was Amtrak? They got $1 billion. I think the airlines got 30 billion or more, and they're back in Congress now. They want another 30 or $40 billion. Where is Amtrak saying, we want this money, we need this money, we want 3 trains a day on these routes, we want to serve the American people properly? That's what it takes. It's not the lack of ideas, it's the lack of will. And bureaucracies get too comfortable with themselves. I went to many a meeting back there at 400 North Capitol with the old Amtrak headquarters, and I can tell you that I just sat there and shook my head. I thought to myself, if this is operating a railroad, you've got me fooled. Because they weren't talking about how to improve things, they were talking about how to hold on, or they were talking about what they needed to do to survive for another year or another 2 years. The vision that we need here is we got to have a 50-year plan and a 100-year plan. That's what the Europeans have had ever since World War II, and that's what we haven't had. We kind of slipped into this. And just one final story, and I'll close and open it up to questions and people who want to take my head off. But I have an op-ed that I've been trying to place for the last few months. You're all aware of what's happening here in Seattle. Antifa, Black Lives Matter and all of those things? Well, I wrote an op-ed. I talked about the African-American workers on America's trains. I talked about how when we were kids growing up, all of the trains were staffed by African-Americans, how the original Pullman company of the late 19th century hired only ex-slaves. And that's how we began the tradition of African-Americans as the principal servers, as we would say today, on our trains. All of the dining car waiters, all of the Pullman porters, all of those good folks. We had tens of thousands when A. Philip Randolph formed the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and Chair Car Attendants in the 1920s. There were something like 50, 60,000, maybe 100,000 African Americans working on our trains. Came the 1960s and Dr. Martin Luther King was trying to save the African American experience and to give us a glimpse of the future of the civil rights movement. And what were we doing? We were eliminating all the passenger trains on which those people worked. We were eliminating all of those high-paying middle-class jobs, high-paying basically because of tips. We were not talking to one another. Environmentalists were not talking to civil rights activists, nor were trained people talking to the other activists. And so we eliminated all of those trains and all of those jobs and put some 25, 30,000 African Americans out of work. One used to shine my shoes down at King Street Station. His name was Meredith. And he used to tell me them's were the best jobs we ever had. I put my 3 kids through college on my tips, and we eliminated all of those jobs. We didn't even think about it. Do you think anybody will publish my op-ed? Do you think the Washington Post wants it, or the New York Times, or the LA Times? They won't even give me the time of day. It's not the story they want to hear. They don't want to hear about how the civil rights movement was itself derailed by the absence of our passenger trains in the 1960s. They don't want history. They don't want these stories. They don't understand history. They're not taught history anymore. Every college and university now teaches race, class, gender, and diversity, but it doesn't teach history. Well, we need to teach ourselves history again. We will be a better country and a stronger country again if we insist on these good things for our people. And if we remind Amtrak that its job, its mission is a national rail passenger system, not just the corridor. And if they don't want to do it, well, let's let the railroads do it. Let's let private enterprise get into it. Let's make it worth their while. We are a capitalist country. I have no problem with that. In World War II, we put 15,000 B-17s, 12,000 B-24s, 10,000 B-29s into the sky. And that was how we did it, cost plus 7%. Boeing, Grumman, give us the bill, and we'll add 7% profit to it. And we won World War II, and we saved democracy, and we saved Western civilization. Don't tell us we can't do it. Don't tell us we have to go begging hat in hand for these kinds of things. We know how to do it, but we just haven't had the right arguments. We just haven't had the right ideas. We just haven't said to our politicians, come on, you guys, it's time for you to measure up. If you can find $3 trillion to save us from a pandemic, you can find us a couple $100 billion for a great rail passenger system in this country. It's time for you to come up and answer to the people and give us what we deserve. I'm an environmentalist. My Green New Deal starts with passenger trains. It always has. That's what I've written about for many, many years. But you know what? My most successful failure as a writer was Allies of the Earth. I wrote it for the environmentalists, and they never read it. I knew that the good folks in rail passenger service would understand what I was talking about, but they never read it. The environmentalists didn't care. The environmentalists still think of wind turbines and solar power plants. Let's dig. They still listen to Elon Musk more than they listen to all of the voices from the past that saved rail passenger service. Let's go for it, good people. Let's get the job done. Let's try something new. I'm 73. I got a thing the other day from the mortuary. Do I want to be cremated or buried? I think that should be telling us something, don't you? We've got to do something different. And we've got to start by being honest to ourselves and honest to the history. Amtrak had its day. Now it's time for something else. Thank you very much.
Well, Al, that's a lot of fire. I'm very impressed. We're going to have a lot of questions here, and since I've got to manage this, any questions that are done here in the conference room, as I discovered with our president, creates a feedback. So at this point, I'm going to ask for people on Zoom to ask you any questions while I figure out a way to at least access the questions that are here.
Right, okay, good.
Is there anyone who has a question on Zoom? All you got to do is unmute yourself and fire away.
Well, this is Jim McCarthy. As far as the environmentalists being for or against rail, to me, it would make sense that they would be for rail, because my understanding is that it's way more fuel efficient, i.e. puts less carbon in the atmosphere per passenger mile than airlines or cars. So I think there's a possible, we should work with environmental groups and get them to be on board with us. Thank
Well,
you.
that's a very good point. And I have been a member of the board of directors of National Association of Railroad Passengers, and we celebrated our 75th anniversary in 1994 by taking a special train from Chicago to the Grand Canyon and then on to LA and then up to San Francisco for a big meeting that we had that year. And I put that all together. And there are good environmentalists out there who understand. But the problem with the environmental community today, and that's a serious problem, is that they're being talked to by the big corporations, by Google and Festus and all these other folks. Amtrak doesn't have very good liaison with the environmental community. At least that's what I hear from my friends in the environmental community today. They're into this idea that we have to save the planet. They're into this idea about climate change. Well, I'm into climate change too. And I realized that 4.5 billion years ago, or 6,000 years ago, whatever your religious preferences may be, God created the heaven and earth. We didn't. And so we're trying to control something. I mean, the arrogance here of the environmental community is unconscionable. They're trying to control something. They won't control population on the planet, but then they think that they can control CO2 with just wind turbines and solar farms. That's coming from these big corporations that are now invested and vested in these things. You people down in Arizona are getting a lot of these solar power plants. One of the biggest ones that was built by Google a few years ago is up near Las Vegas. It's the Ivanpah Solar Power Plant. The government gave the Google Corporation $1.6 billion in guaranteed loans. They didn't even have to come up with their own money to build this 4,000-acre plant that puts the power onto these big towers, heats them up allegedly so that they can keep turbines running throughout the night. The problem is they don't. There's not enough heat there to do it. And so the turbines fail and gas has to kick in anyway. But these are the myths that are getting in our way with rail passenger service. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right that the trains are 7 times more efficient on fuel. And look at their rights of way, for crying out loud. They're minuscule compared to superhighways and parking lots and all of those things. And I wrote it, like I say, we've said it over and over and over again. But people just aren't listening because other power groups are finding the ear of Congress, even as we have been losing it. What if Google were behind, or Facebook were behind, or Twitter were behind passenger trains? We'd be beating off train-ons with a stick. We'd have thousands of passenger cars being constructed as we speak. That's the difference. And they're not. And why aren't they? What is in it for them to have electric cars and electric trucks, but not solar-powered and wind-powered passenger trains? What's in it for them? That's a good question. And that's something that we need to keep on exploring.
Now, Alfred, that we've got, in order to get some other questions in here, I'm going to ask you to keep your answers compressed a little bit, because
Okay.
Golly, you've got momentum. Our president has a question for you, so I'm going to mute this so it won't feed back. Go right ahead there, Todd.
Yeah, Al, I want to just thank you very much for addressing us today. I mean, I think this is fantastic, and I am the kind of person, I don't believe that there are bad ideas, and I think this is, you know, personally, where we agree is much more aligned than where we disagree. I mean, I see a perfect synergy between the 3 trains a day on all the long distance routes. I think that's a fantastic idea. That would build up the corridors better than spending a lot of money on a bunch of stub corridors throughout the United States. I completely agree with that. I would point out, of course, in Europe, and those railroads are owned by the government, and they are publicly managed, they're publicly owned, and the government tells them where they're going to operate and what the priorities are. So that is a huge difference. And Deutsche Bahn's fantastic. I was stationed over there. I rode it all the time. Fabulous train service, obviously. And I would say that Amtrak could be like Deutsche Bahn. And so the challenge that I have for you and my question is this. The Amtrak law actually is, in my view, almost genius. It provides for the right to operate over the railroad's tracks. It provides for statutory priority for passenger trains. And so I don't see any impediment if Amtrak had the right management to Amtrak being the vehicle for this vision. Conversely, the freight railroads look like they're in the process of going out of business as quickly as they possibly can. They're operating fewer trains, carrying less freight. Why do you think that the freight railroads are somehow going to be enlightened just because they have a cost plus percentage of cost contract, which, by the way, is a very extremely inefficient way to contract for service? But why do you think that the cost plus percentage of fee or cost plus percentage of cost contract is going to somehow solve the passenger rail problem in America? And I'll take your answer.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah,
We got you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have no confidence in that, but I do know this as a historian, that when the railroads were operating passenger trains, that was when they were at their best, in service to the shipper and in service to the American public. And once we let them get away with the argument that service to the public, meaning the traveling public, no longer mattered, then they began to go downhill on both sides, and it was all the faster. The other proposal that Claiborne Pell said to me years ago before his death, when he wrote his book Megalopolis Unbound, he said, Al, what we really need is a interstate railroad network the same way we have interstate highways. We need to nationalize the railroads, and then Union Pacific can operate, Southern, any railroad in the country can operate. They go on the tracks and they ask for a slot, and they go on the tracks with their trains, and they can go anywhere. That's what we might need. Everybody has different ideas. The problem is that this one just isn't working. And the Amtrak law was, as you said, well written, but the railroads never intended to honor it, and that was the big problem. The railroads didn't honor it. I probably was in 60 round trips from Santa Barbara to the Bay Area in the 1970s. I probably was on the Starlight when it was on time maybe twice out of those 60 runs. They had all that padding in the schedule from Glendale on. So if they got to Glendale within 2 hours of the schedule, voila, they could make LA and get their incentive on time. And that still exists on a lot of the Amtrak system. When we did our special train in 1994, I wrote to everybody and I said, now, I don't want to be embarrassed. I'm taking all of these big donors from my organization west on your railroads, and I don't want to be embarrassed. We got into La Junta 2 hours early. We got into Lamy 2 hours early. We sat there. They've got the railroads know what's going on here. And a few years ago, I got a Union Pacific executive very mad at me for telling an audience I was speaking to that the Union Pacific delays Amtrak trains. He said, we don't delay Amtrak trains. And I said, why are you telling me that? I've read all the letters. I've read the letters. I've gone into your archives. I've seen the letters. He said, yeah, well, don't pay any attention to that. He said, and besides, do you know how much oil we have to spend to get a freight train moving again? I said, there you go. That's why you put Amtrak in the hole. So I'll keep this answer short because John has asked me to keep them short. The thing of it is, we've got to get off of our collective history and start writing a new history. And I don't say that my ideas are sacrosanct. I don't say that they're going to work. And you're absolutely right. There's no reason to believe the railroads are going to answer anything. But it's time that we as citizens started demanding corporate accountability the way the Europeans do. They have a lot more corporate accountability than we do in this country.
Any other? There we go, I'll unmute there. Al, I think you just wore everyone out.
Okay. Well, I tried to get us back on schedule, and I think I did that, didn't I?
Yes, sir, you did. As a matter of fact, you still have 8 more minutes before we switch over to Bruce and his presentation.
Well,
I do have a question here. Can you hang on a second? I got one here. I'm figuring out how to do this on the fly. So wait till I get back over there, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Press that button, okay? So it won't feed back and cause all that noise. Okay, Al, stand by. Here we go. Go ahead and ask.
Just a thought. Why don't we connect our system to Canada and to Mexico?
an excellent thought.
I live in Douglas, Arizona, and I hear trains because they're just across the border. They're just freight trains, it's true, but they're still using their tracks.
And would you mute that again, please?
Oh,
There you go. All right, Al, what's your response to that?
Well, that's one of the secrets to the success of the European railways. They have always been coordinated. They've always. I remember the first time I went to Europe on a rail pass, and all I had to do when I crossed the border on a train was show the new conductor or the customs official my passport and my rail pass, and the train barely stopped for a few minutes, or the people got on before the border crossing to do this with everybody who was riding. It was this coordination, and that's where Europe has always excelled, is they've always understood. We have this idea that we don't need borders. No, we need borders. But sure, when it comes to transportation, we need to cross them far more easily. And I think that's a great idea. Why don't we coordinate with Canada? Because there's a long border crossing here on the Cascade service here in Washington State. It can sometimes take an hour before the train resumes again and goes the last 50 miles into Vancouver, BC. And that just stretches out the time involved on all of these trips. And it would help these other struggling economies, especially Mexico's economy, if we had these trains. I suspect that one of the reasons we don't have them is because we are concerned about border security in terms of illegal immigration. I suspect that this goes back a long time in our history, because I remember when I lived in Texas, going out to Big Bend National Park and having my car inspected thoroughly every time I came back from even 50 or 100 miles of the border by Border Patrol agents. But these are the kinds of things that, yes, make sense. And we need to push for these kinds of things.
Now, Al, there's one little comment here I wanted to address from Robert. He said, could you make your talk available on YouTube so that it could have a wider exposure? Well, we are recording this Zoom meeting, and once I'm able to download it, I'll break it up and put it on YouTube, as well as making the link for the recording available to those who are here. It's going to be painful for me because I get to watch all the technical errors, but we're getting the hang of it, which is really great.
No, it was good. I thought that's a great idea. And the film that you and Tony made. That's still up on YouTube, right?
Yes, sir, it is.
You
Yep.
know, and that was excellent. And that again, it goes then, and that's, let me refer to that just a minute, because I love that film. It's what we've been trying to do for 50 years. We've been trying to educate, to educate, to educate. And we do. And then it's kind of like the student comes in at the end of summer vacation and forgot everything you taught the last academic year. And we have to educate all over again. And that's part of the frustration of this fight all of these years. We forget the history, or our clients forget the history, and we're right back there educating again about the highway lobby and the auto lobby and all of these kinds of things. So absolutely, the more of these things that we can have up, the better off we are. And the one that you did with Tony narrating was exceptionally good. I thought it was one of the best things put out by the rail passenger community in the last 5 or 10 years. I wish that we'd had something like that 40 years ago when NARP was getting started.
Well, for those of you who want to see the video that Al is referring to, please go to the Arizona All Aboard Arizona website. And I believe we still have a link to that video that Tony wrote and put together last summer, which actually got quite a bit of response, not only from Al, but from all kinds of people, because it pointed out the real reason that railroads have to serve the needs of the citizens of the United States. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Yes.
There you go. Here's Chuck Mott.
Okay. There is a solution that gets the freight railroads involved in passenger. If you notice, the freight business that's growing is a small package business that Amazon, Walmart, and others are doing. And Brian and I are working on just a concept of getting into that gigantic growing freight market. But here's the key to passenger. If you want to compete with the service, over-the-road trucking and with air freighters, you've got to be running freight trains at passenger train speeds, scheduled, short, fast, between points A, points B. And the thing is, the railroads are losing coal. The intermodal business is matured. If I were a railroad CEO, worth my bucks that I get, and for the stockholders, what is the future of this business that we can get into that we're not in today? And it's right under their nose. There is so much of that business, and it's growing, growing, growing. So here's where you merge your technologies. If you can build an express freight that goes 80 miles an hour, you can also run passenger trains at 80 miles an hour. And there's incentives to modify the signaling systems, the tracks, and build the infrastructure. And it's a win-win-win. Just an idea, but thinking ahead, where are the railroads going to get their business in the future? So much of what they got is they're losing, as has been pointed out. And you've got to constantly move ahead and come up with new ideas. It's what every business has to do to survive. I throw it out for what it's worth.
Very good point. Very good point. And that's what makes the European freight trains so efficient. They're short and they're fast. They're really moving. And you sit there in the Rhine Valley and they're going up the valley at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour around those little castle tunnels, just like the passenger trains are. Now, of course, they moved the passenger trains out of the Rhine Valley, so they're going to full 175 miles an hour. But I still like taking the slower passenger trains, doing a mere 80 or 90, and go through the Rhine Valley. The answers are there. It's just that nobody has been forced into the efficiencies that make these things viable. That's the problem. And by always accepting the excuses from these people, that's part of the problem. I enjoy taking on the executive community with new ideas, and I've done that as you have, Chuck, all of your life. I've tried to. I remember when Dick Bressler was the chairman and chief executive officer of Burlington Northern, and he used to have me down to the private car because I was a young professor, and I knew some things about Mount St. Helens, which he wanted to give to the American people, and what was a coup for public relations. And I remember arguing with him about passenger trains, and I said, well, you love your passenger train. You've got your board of directors train. You've got all these wonderful dining cars and you've got Glacier View all set for your board of directors. And why can't the American people have passenger trains? And he said, well, hem and haw, you got to stick it to them once in a while and make them honest. But that's a great idea, Chuck. You're right. This less than carload freight is burgeoning. And where are the railroads still saying, well, if we can't have a container, we don't want it. And they're losing out.
Well, Al, I think we're going to have to wrap it up at that.
Well, good.
It's 12 o'clock, and the next and final speaker before our open question and answer session. And Al, if you can, I hope you can stay on the Zoom.
Yeah, oh yeah, you bet.
Okay, so I'm gonna mute you just so that you're, and then we're going to Bruce Ashton. You're in San Antonio, is that right, Bruce?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
We can hear you like a rocket ship. That's great.
All righty. The only problem I got with your instructions. Oh, there we go.
Yep. We see you. You're all set.
All right. Now, where's the launch presentation? Well, thank you for having invited me to make a presentation. I am keenly aware that I'm the only person standing between you and lunch, so I'll try to make it pretty quick. So, all right. Well, I'm Bruce Ashton. I'm here in San Antonio. I am the Texas Council representative, and I am keenly aware of the Sunset Limited scheduling problems, because if you ever try to get between San Antonio to Tucson for a Saturday meeting, it's not quite possible. So I hope to give you a quick summary of what we've done on the Sunset campaign. A lot of this you probably already know, but maybe for those who haven't tuned in, we'll find out. Quick history of the Sunset Limited campaign, which most of you know, but in 2010, the Amtrak FIA plan was initiated, and they had three very important recommendations for the daily service between Los Angeles and New Orleans. They recommended a better schedule between the two so that it also connected better with the Texas Eagle. And they also recommended that the Sunset Limited be rescheduled or rerouted, however you want to say it, on the Burlington in order to serve Riverside. In 2011, the Amtrak board approved the changes that recommended, but in 2012, they got the sticker shock from Union Pacific when they say, yeah, we can do what you want to do, but we have a capacity request of $750 million. Nevertheless, they proceeded. The only thing that they did do was they changed the schedule. And so by 2017, the Sunset Limited had achieved the ridership and revenue goals associated with the schedule change. In 2019, we said it's time to resurrect the program. So we launched a new program, a new campaign to solicit local support for all the cities and communities served by the Sunset. As a result, we got something like, I think 19 different supports from basically mostly from Texas and Arizona. We didn't get any support from New Orleans, from Louisiana or from Arizona. In this campaign, we also did a complete study, which I would call a white paper or a report, however you want to phrase it, which was updated and presented to Amtrak in 2019. A couple of key decisions there was that with 133% increase in frequency, you achieve 125% increase in ridership and revenue. The system would break even, and you could go to a daily Sunset Limited with no additional capacity. Then Amtrak talks to Union Pacific with this, and again, Union Pacific says, yes, we can do it, but our new number is $1 billion. So at this point, RPA said, okay, what else can we do? And there was a couple of things that we looked at very seriously. One was the capacity study. Since Union Pacific says we need money for capital improvements along the line, we thought, well, maybe we need to get an independent study to actually help describe what the improvements will be just to have something to bring to the table with the negotiations with Amtrak and UP. Of course, we all recognize that UP will take the position, well, we've got our own capacity studies and here's what our numbers show. Only trouble with this capacity study, it's seriously expensive. Depends on which scenario you picked up. It runs somewhere between, maybe say $150,000 to $250,000. So that one was a good thought. It's still on the shelf, but right now there's no funding for it. The other thing that popped up was to look at the economic study of the implant, which is a program, I guess is the way to say it, or a way of studying economics developed by the University of Mississippi Business School, the Trent Lott Business School. And RPA had been a licensee of this program for several years, and it was used in looking at both the Empire Builder and the Southwest Chief plans cut. So we had the experience. The plan, of course, now the object of the plan is that it demonstrates to local officials the economic benefits of having a Daily Sunset Limited. Problem again pops up is that budget cuts at RPA resulted in them not being able to renew the license. So we come along with, okay, let's raise $35,000 to fund this. And the Ashton bright idea was, hell, that will be no problem. Texas RPA members can raise that themselves. Uh-oh. Either I'm overly optimistic or completely naive on how to raise funds, but it has not happened to date. We have raised 41% of the goal, so it's not too bad. But the warm, fuzzy feeling we got out of this is that from other members, 18 out-of-state RPA members have contributed to the fund. So there is a little, silver lining out there. Before I go back, what's happening now is that several other state organizations, and of course, you're good folks there at All Aboard Arizona, and a couple other ones on the East Coast are saying, hey, this model can help us. So a lot of people are looking at how to, join in and help us raise the funds. So we'll see how that works out. For background, I don't know if y'all have participated in the RPA webinars. We had one August 19th to 20, and it was recorded, and you can see it on the RPA website if you get in there and do a search on their called the Daily Campaign for Daily Service August. I think got one too many dailies in there, but you catch it. It is also available on YouTube. I looked at that yesterday. But it goes under that you do the search on Regional Briefing Sunset Limited. And that's it's much more extensive than my presentation today, but it gets into more of the details of what's behind our campaign. So we're now looking to continue to raise funds. If you're not aware of it, you can go to our RPA website and their new donation panel, I guess that's the correct word to use. When you make your donation, you can designate where it goes, and then under that you would designate the Sunset Limited campaign. Or if you don't want to do the website, you can contact Jonesy Stone, the RPA staff at Jonesy Stone, or J Stone, I should say, at norp.org. Now, let's just think about what happens if we're successful in raising the funds. There's going to be some manpower and time to gather the input data. I quickly looked at the input data that have been used in the past, and I think there's something like 20 to 25 different parameters you put in. Parameters like ridership, the growth of the community or the area, all which data is available in the public sources, but there. Then you run the model, okay? A lot of data goes in, a lot of data comes out. Then you have to analyze it now, sir. Do we have the manpower? Do we have the resources to people to look at the model and see results? You also have to look at the problem of, once we have the model, which cities do you run it? Is there a priority? Do we pick certain areas? Do we one state at a time? So a decision has to be made on how to vet the process of how we proceed. So that's it. Finally, once we run the model, you have to sit back and ask, okay, when do we approach the city leaders with the implant results after the pandemic subsides? How are we going to message this to the civic leaders? You know, here in Texas, I had 9 different cities I visited. That took me almost a full year to get around trying to make appointments. So we're going to need a cadre of folks who are able to make a consistent message applicable to their area of how to do that. So it's going to take some time and manpower to do that. Once you get in the front door, we got to decide, what do we really want them to do? Here's your numbers, Houston. Look how much money more your economy will be improved if we have daily. Now here's what we want you to do. And that question needs to be addressed. Finally, let's look back at some of the old campaigns we had. What lessons did we learn from the Daily Cardinal campaign, the Gulf Coast Sunset Limited campaign, and the I-20 corridor campaign? Basically, what we've done with Sunset Limited has been copycat, I guess I'll use the word, of what all those programs did. Each of those campaigns addressed themselves and got to the point where they had demonstration trains to run through. Lots of bands, lots of flowers, lots of flags, lots of PR, lots of stuff. None of which have ever ended up in fruition. So you have to say, okay, what are we going to do different from these campaigns with the Sunset Limited campaign? The basic question is, to answer that question is, we are in the process of developing data and information support that's going to help Amtrak sit down and talk to UP so that Amtrak and UP have a meeting in the afternoon, not just in the morning. It's going to take time. There's a lot of questions out there. Right now, I'm concentrating on getting, how to raise money, but these questions are in the back of my mind, things that I see that we're going to have to address down in the future. And we need some really smart minds to start thinking about those questions to figure out what the course will be on the Sunset Limited campaign. That's quick and simple because I know you want to go to lunch, so I'll sign off and take questions if you want to, John.
Bruce, is you be nice enough to release your screen sharing so we can see all the folks.
Release my what?
Your screen sharing, sir.
How did I do that? Oh, okay.
Up at the top there.
Top share. Okay, here we go. There we go. That good?
Yes, sir, you're good. I'm going to remove the spotlight, and so if there's any questions in the world of Zoom for Bruce, away. All right, Bruce, so apparently there is a question.
No, I have a question.
Oh, there we go, Miles. All right.
Yeah, you live in Texas, right? Is that, you said you live in, do you still live in Texas?
Yes, sir. San Antonio.
Oh, I was just wondering, I guess this isn't really related to Sunset Limited. I was more asking if you're familiar with the Texas Central project from Dallas to Houston.
I follow the stuff on that. Yeah.
Oh, I just kind of was wondering, I don't know, your opinion on it.
Okay. If you look at the Texas Central, their model for development is based upon the distance between Houston and San Antonio is what they call the sweet spot. It's a little bit too far to drive, and it's a little too short to fly. And so if you look at the flying time, you're spending 30 minutes in the airport to get on the plane. You know, you're
Easily.
talking a 45 to 55 minute flight, maybe an hour 10 at the max, you know, somewhere in that area, depends on the wind speeds.
Not
And then
to
you-
mention
another
delays are common.
30 minutes to get off the plane and out of the airport. So we're talking roughly 2 hours.
Yep.
Where if you're downtown Houston, you know, they're talking about a 90-minute trip. That is the deal they're looking at, okay? Stepping back now, if you look at what else if you look what they've done in Japan, basically they do what I would call a supersize of the Denver train station. You know, Denver train station had boom, you know, developments, apartments, condos, business all around the Denver train station now. That is the plan they did in Tokyo and every stop they have. And so the sites they picked for Dallas is it's on the very edge of downtown. You know, it's not a bad part of town. Houston is different. Houston, rather you used to get the last mile, to get the last 10 miles from where they put their station to downtown was just too congested and all that, too expensive. So they picked what they call a population geographic center for their station. And that is on the northwest side of the inner loop with major freeway.
Makes sense.
That's a quick overview. I got a few more facts, but does that answer your question?
Yes.
The deal is they've got one more hurdle to pass, and I forget exactly which agency it is, but then they'll turn dirt. The interesting thing about Texas Central is who they brought in to help them. They brought in the Spanish company that does ticketing and reservations.
Are you talking about Renfe or some other Spanish company?
I don't know if it was Runte or not, but it was one of those Spanish ones. They also brought in some other outside who helped them design how do you get people in and out of the station quickly.
Mm.
And that's the key thing for impatient Texans, you know. So that's one thing. And they brought in some other ones. They are going the contractor, the combination of both domestic contractor. I don't know who can't recall who it was. I want to say Zachary, but don't hold me that. And another firm out of Europe, as I recall. Of course, the technology is Japanese.
Okay, so let's see here. We have a question on the inside. If you don't mind, if you guys go ahead.
Hello, Bruce?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, a little break up, but keep going.
My question is, I know that the $1 million is really a diplomatic way of saying no, but has anybody ever asked Union Pacific to break down that $1 billion? Just where is the money going to go?
That is what I was alluding to in the capacity study. You know, since we're not at the table with Amtrak and Union Pacific, we don't have those details. I don't know if Amtrak put that question to Union Pacific, but that is one of the keys. You know, are you building a gold rail, or are you building something that's really we can get by with this? We know that back in 2011, part of the request for money was to help fund the double rail between there in Arizona into El Paso. So how they would spend this $1 billion, we don't know, and it does need to be addressed. I just don't have it.
Mr. Alan Mott, did you have a question for Bruce?
No, not at this time.
Okay, very good. I saw your picture there for a while, thought maybe you were interested. Is there any other questions for Bruce?
Everybody wants to go to lunch.
Well, at this point, I suppose the agenda says Cracker Barrel session questions and answers, which is basically an open question session using this wonderful device that I'm starting to get the hang of, kind of. So if anyone has questions for any of the previous speakers or vice versa or whatever, now is your chance to speak or forever hold your peace.
This is Steve Roberts.
Go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to comment a little bit on what Bruce's excellent presentation. One of our models that we're using on this is the Southwest Chief, where the local cities and towns got Build Tiger grants for some of the capital projects. So once we figure out what the capital projects is, we can then use that as a source of, hopefully use that as a source of capital outside of the Amtrak budget to fund some of these capital projects. The problem is that much of the capacity needs are freight or network related, but don't meet UP's standard rate of return, so they're not done. But you can't run the passenger train daily without doing them. But you're going in and building a project that's 99% for freight, and that's the challenge in all of this. So that's one of our models, is what was done on the Southwest Chief.
So in other words, it's an upgrade issue for the lines that are currently running freight to be safe enough for passenger use? Is that what you're saying?
It's not safety, it's capacity, network capacity. In other words, they're adequate for what UP is doing today. They don't meet its internal right of return for them to address it, but you can't run the daily passenger train without addressing it. Otherwise, you get the delays that we see today on the Sunset. But 90% of what's involved is really a network investment rather than an investment specifically for a passenger train. In other words, one capacity investment that's strictly passenger would be, say, a station track at Tucson. But when you're talking about a second bridge over a river someplace to allow you to run a reliable Sunset Limited, 99% of that is freight related, freight growth related.
Okay.
And of course,
I learn something every time I come to one of these
and
events.
the other problem that exists with the freight railroads is they get one bite of the apple. The only bite of the apple they get is before service begins under the current Amtrak reimbursement rates. If you look at the commuter railroads, if you look at ACE commuter service in the Bay Area, ACE pays UP a capital maintenance charge as well as a capital access charge beyond avoidable costs of running the train. So UP gets a constant yearly flow of dollars to pay for any capital investments they might have for capacity. They don't get that from Amtrak. So they have to project out 20, 50 years. What are we going to need for capacity? And that's what so that's why it's $1 billion. It's not that they need $1 billion to run the train tomorrow. They need $1 billion to keep running the train 20 years from now.
Okay. Interesting. Any other questions for the Cracker Barrel session? Okay, hang
Hello,
on.
this is
President. Go ahead, John.
Hey, hello, this is John Christoph. I'm a member serving on the City of Tempe's Transportation Commission currently. Just as a comment for all of the presentations we've seen so far today, because we talked a lot about advocacy and building connections between different advocacy groups that are doing this work across Arizona and across multiple states, is that the biggest successes that we have found on the ground as people doing advocacy are built through approaching your advocacy from a position of solidarity. And I am especially concerned by things I hear from a lot of rail advocates who take a more, shall I say, hostile position on that. Specifically, so the things that I think are interesting are when we're talking about capacity studies, we necessarily have a synergy of goals with Maricopa Association of Governments, with Arizona Department of Transportation, with the city of Tempe, city of Phoenix, all of the other cities across the valley, and the county governments as well, and as well with Amtrak. What I am cautious about is this idea that, especially as mentioned in Al Runte's presentation, that we need to break through that and go directly to the federal level. Our advocacy power is rooted in local stuff. Our power is not rooted as strongly in federal legislation. And I think that at some point there needs to be recognition from rail advocates that we have to fight on the fronts we have available rather than on the fronts that we would like to fight on. And if that means building partnerships with groups that we have political disagreements with, that needs to be something we get past. Whether that means Democratic Socialists of America, who are very in favor of nationalizing the railroads, whether that means proponents of the Green New Deal, who do have things useful to say about rail infrastructure, whether that means the environmental groups that in particular Mr. Runte seemed to be disparaging, and whether that means universities and climate scientists, which, speaking as somebody who works for Arizona State University as an earth scientist, I don't appreciate being called a liar when it comes to the climate science work that I and my colleagues are doing. Solidarity between all these groups who have a common goal is necessary, and we cannot build a coalition without a fundamental understanding that we all want the same thing if we're going to be disparaging each other in the process of making our advocacy and our arguments. That's all I have to say.
Can I follow up? John, can I follow up?
Absolutely, the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with that. We have too many people in advocating for increased, taking a adversarial position with the railroads. And my business background, you have to look at it somewhat from the railroad's point of view. You want to come into my backyard with your lawnmower, but let's talk about it. So I've heard too many people talk about the damn railroads, and that is not the way to look at it. If you're going to do this, they're going to be your partner all the way, and you have to develop that relationship. That's just speaking to one point of your talk, but I agree with what you say.
Great. I appreciate the comments. I really do believe, having been president of a historical society and now president of All Aboard Arizona, we do have to take a fresh look. We do have to, because, Al's right. What we've done the last 50 years has not been 100% successful. Although I do say that Amtrak is not the failure that some people paint it out to be. And I would point out to everybody that I don't think the 20th Century Limited and the Super Chief are just out there waiting in the wings to return to service. We're gonna have to look at new ways, and I agree 100%. We need partnerships with the environmental community, historic preservationists, people who are looking at building downtowns in walkable, livable communities with affordable housing. Something like the Green New Deal. Absolutely. That is one area where this vision, if we're talking about a vision for passenger rail service, nationwide passenger rail service, that's exactly the kind of place where we're seeing that momentum. And I agree, we have to build these alliances with all community groups, universities, and the sky's the limit, really. Anybody who's got this common vision, common interest, I think that is what we need to do. So I really, I applaud that personally. The other point I would like to just make really quickly
we're sort of accepting this capacity issue on tri-weekly trains versus daily trains. And I'm having a hard time figuring out why you need more capacity for a daily train than you do for a 3-day-a-week train. I realize that that's, additional days of frequency, but you can't, I'm not convinced that that UP is holding back freight trains and only running them on the days that Amtrak doesn't run. And that somehow that's, causing it's going to cause this huge capacity issue. I mean, obviously back in the day, they ran a lot more trains and they were able to run the Sunset, the Golden State, the Argonaut, the Imperial, and it didn't seem to disrupt the railroad that much. And so I am a little skeptical about UP's claims, but I also agree we need to work with UP. And part of the Green New Deal and part of what Chuck was talking about was enhancing rail so it can handle some of these, the sensitive freight traffic, the high performance freight traffic and passenger traffic. And I do agree that that's a great opportunity, but I am skeptical of the UP, but I think.
Yes. Todd appeared, and Steve and I both want to reply to that comment.
John, where's John? John?
Just for the record, I don't have control of the floor here. Y'all can say whatever you want to.
Todd, can
He's
I make
muted.
John, are you there?
John, Johnny was mute. John, you got muted.
Are you talking to this John or the other John? John James or John Christoph?
John James.
I'm here.
I just wanted to answer that last comment, couple of comments.
Jump in.
Look, it's nice to see a young face among all of us oldsters that's interested in passenger rail. Nobody is disparaging what's going on, but one of the things that I learned many, many years ago is that if you're not critical and if you're not honest in your criticism, you're not going to advance in anything. The secret of the environmental movement 50 years ago was to raise the level of controversy about the issues facing this planet. Now we have only one issue that is said to be facing this planet, climate change. Fine, but we have only one solution to that particular problem. No, there are multiple solutions to it. And that's where I'm saying that the environmentalists have forgotten passenger rail. They have their agendas, sure, and I've heard some of those agendas, but I wrote Allies of the Earth, Railroads and the Solar Preservation for the environmental community, not to bring back the super chief, not to bring back the Phoebe Snow, but to lay out the issues. And they're still not getting addressed. And when an environmentalist, when the chief executive officer, the executive director of the Sierra Club says that John Muir is now being ridden out of the party, that's a big deal to me because John Muir was the founder of the Sierra Club. And I ask myself, what have these people in their 30s and 40s who are changing or hoping to change all of this American history done for their country? I had 3 friends who died in Vietnam. I had a cousin who died in World War II before I even saw him. These are the things that the country is forgetting about as young people are told that these issues no longer matter, but they do. And I'm not disparaging what's going on, but I am saying that if we want to solve these things, we have to be truly critical and we have to open up the floor to the criticism. The comedians won't even go on college campuses anymore because they can't poke fun at anybody. They say that young people won't respond because they can't see the humor in things and they feel that they're being set upon. And when I was in college 55 years ago, that was never the case. We were open to criticism. We criticized one another. We engaged in very intense debate. And I was very happy in the 1970s and 80s to be a part of the rail passenger movement because that's exactly how it was running itself. You could go into Congress and you could testify and you could be critical. Now people say that criticism is off the boards. When you're criticizing somebody, you're demeaning them. You're not demeaning them. You're not disparaging them. You're criticizing them. And we have to be critical. We have to be very, very creative, but we also have to be critical. I was only being critical this morning. I'm not saying that I have the answers. I wouldn't pretend to have the answers. If I'd had the answers, we wouldn't still be here. We'd have had the answers and we'd have all the passenger trains we could possibly want. But we have to get critical and we have to stay critical and we have to play on all these fronts. And we have to remember that there's still a lot of interest in this country who do not want to see what we want to see, which is the revival of the passenger train.
Just as a point of factual correction, most of that's not true. It would be very beneficial for you, sir, if you'd be willing to take the same approach to criticism with things that you seem to not want criticized. Universities are doing the work of criticism for history that has not been criticized historically. The environmental movement supports passenger rail. I have been working with them for my entire life, and on the Prop 105 campaign that saved the Phoenix light rail system, we could count on their support. We could also count on the support of Black Lives Matter, the Democratic Socialists, and of other groups who support the public infrastructure needs of the poor communities and the urban communities in Phoenix that rely on reliable mass transit. We can leverage those same groups for intercity rail if we stop saying that they're part of the problem. And if we recognize that the views we have about their positions may not be founded based upon what traditional views of these issues have asserted.
Well, how about here in the city of Seattle that 133 businesses have closed their doors in downtown Seattle? How about the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement here has led to the greatest economic reversal in the history of downtown Seattle ever? How about—
I would ask you to get past those hangups and actually have a conversation with them, because I think you will find that they have more in common with you than you realize, especially when it comes to the role of corporate personhood in the United States of America over the last half century.
Well, I agree. No, I agree with that. And I've had those conversations, but I must admit that I get off the wagon when people start throwing Molotov cocktails at businesses and openly looting the businesses of downtown Seattle. That's when I get off the bandwagon. That's when I start to say that it's not up to me to tolerate. It's up to people to stop the violence and listen to what I have to say, or what other people have to say. Don't you agree with that?
I think it would behoove you to talk to those groups further about where that violence is coming from.
Well, where is it coming from? You tell me.
We can be clear here that we're getting a little bit off subject, and now we're talking about the discussion and debate as opposed to the issues at hand that All Aboard Arizona is trying to address. If I may interrupt in order to move things along, Brian, you had your hand up. Would you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Brian Yanity, are you there? You just texted me a moment ago.
Bruce Ashton here. Can I talk to Todd's comment?
Can you hear me? This is Brian.
Oh, there's Brian. Okay, Brian, you go, and then we'll come back to you, Bruce. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so yeah, this is Brian Yanity, and I'm a person in my 30s, and for the record, I'm on the Sierra Club Transportation Committee, the statewide to the state of California, and our recent comment letter to the California State Transportation Plan from Sierra Club California was extremely pro-rail, because I wrote those parts. I injected a lot of pro-rail stuff, and I'm a young person in that committee now who's pushing the older generation of Sierra Club tends to not know much about rail. It's younger activists pushing it. Anyway, but I'm also on the board member of Rail Passenger Association of California and Nevada, RailPAC, and I would like to propose, going forward as a coalition building thing, a little exercise. It's very cheap. It just costs the cost of paper and ink and stamps, is that RailPAC and Steve, if you're still on the line, you can join in, our president of RailPAC. I was proposing that we kind of write a joint letter with All Aboard Arizona and maybe other organizations along the Sunset route, because I was thinking of talking about some Coachella Valley projects that we're trying to get going on the state and county level that's on the Sunset route that's directly relevant to a Daily Sunset campaign. And then Arizona, Elmwood, Arizona Convention, you know, the Phoenix, LA, west of Phoenix line, and you know, tying this into the Tucson Phoenix service, and that's good for California too. So, are you guys interested in doing a joint letter?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
All right. I just want to say for the record, I certainly am. And I can't see why anybody but, you know, we can certainly take it up with the board, but I'm 100% in favor of that. I think like I say, building these alliances and, you know, I've had, you know, outreach to the Texas folks, Bruce and Dan Pugh and some of the other folks out there. And I think, you know, definitely we're stronger together, and that's music to my ears. So I'm definitely in favor of that.
Yeah, all aboard Arizona and ourselves at RailPac and the folks from Texas have worked very diligently on this Sunset Limited effort. Where we ran into the red signal was on this implant issue that Bruce mentioned, is that we were at the point where the next step was to take this, because they had started running the model, and then the licensing expired, and we were anticipating having the results of that model in the spring of 2020 and rolling out and doing all kinds of outreach to local governments. And then everything stopped, and then the pandemic came along. And so that's why we've kind of been in this holding pattern since then. So Brian, I agree 100% with you, but we're still in this conundrum of we don't have anything left. We don't have any tool to go out to the local governments with until this implant thing gets resolved.
Well, in the near term, do you think we could write a letter about like Coachella Valley rail studies and Phoenix, Tucson stuff, kind of on the more local state level, and just showing how state activists in California, Arizona, like we're scratching the back of Arizona. We want the Phoenix, Tucson, and better service from Phoenix westward.
Well,
and then they support Coachella Valley. I mean, because that's right. Stuff that's like on the.
I think, Brian, I think with your involvement now and interest in Riverside County, I think there's some things we have to do in Riverside County first to make sure that we don't surprise them with anything that they feel upsets their Coachella Valley service, and make sure they're comfortable with the position of the Sunset, because I'm not so sure that it's part of their plan. So we need to do that first.
Bruce, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
To comment, follow up on Brian's statement. If you want to get a coalition with Texas, the organization that we want to use will be the Texas Rail Advocates, and they have a website there. Most of the members are located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but they're well aware of what we're doing here. I'd like to go back and talk about Todd's comment about not understanding why it's simply not able to run a single extra passenger train on UP. The point Steve and I were trying to make is that we're looking at it from UP's point of view. Yes, today they could do it, but you understand that the funds of what Amtrak pays UP is not generating enough revenue or profit to UP to continue this as is. And there's no way that the federal government is ever going to give a grant to pay for ongoing usage. So the course that we're trying to take here is, okay, UP, you need a capacity because you're now running freight trains that are 200, 220 car lengths. We don't have sidings along that line that enable trains to pass each other. And as a result, when the Amtrak train comes by with 7 cars, it gets put in the first siding. So if UP says, I need money for longer sidings, that would be doing it. I think there is one siding they're doing near Alpine they're trying to connect two sidings that are 5 miles apart, which basically will give them a double track for maybe, 8 miles, 9 miles. So that's what I think UP is looking at. Steve, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I have heard this as a secondhand comment, but apparently UP's main focus is, and what the situation is with the daily sunset and where the daily trains would meet. Apparently, with the tri-weekly service, the train meets are in areas that are less congested, or actually don't meet at all. And so if you run it daily, you have some passenger trains meeting passenger trains out there. And when you dump a freight train or maybe two freight trains in on top of that, and especially now with the longer freight trains, you end up with a real jackpot. And and the other thing too is that we know capacity is issue. All you have to do is look at the current on-time performance, the historic on-time performance of the Sunset. It's just never performed. There's always freight train meets. And this goes back decades, because when I was in grad school, I was also working as a fireman on the LA division, and the Sunset was always late into Yuma, and we were always racing towards Los Angeles to get the 8:30 San Diegan connection. So there's capacity issues out there that we need to deal with. It's network capacity.
Gentlemen, just as a reminder, we're scheduled to end at 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So we have approximately 10 more minutes in this Cracker Barrel session. Just to let you know, at that point, we run out of recording capacity, and we won't be able to document what we're talking about here. So in order to keep it straight and forward, I just want to let you guys know we have 10 more minutes. You have a question, sir?
Yes. Well, more of a comment. And this goes back to what Todd said, I believe, during his his first presentation, and that is that there are no bad ideas. Well, I think that's the initial approach that we really need to take. When somebody comes to us with an idea that we don't agree with, we need to not disparage the person. We can disagree with the idea, but don't disparage the person. Most of these ideas have some element of truth or of need in them, and we need to listen to them. And we can go ahead and say, well, that's not really going to work because of this, that, and the other. But if we want to incorporate, or if we want to bring in a lot of people into this process, we need to be listening to what they have to say. And they often, maybe out of lack of information or knowledge or whatever, bring forward ideas that don't always work or may not work. But it usually expresses some kind of need or desire or whatever. That's basically what I have to say. It's a practice of consultation, of being able to work together in large groups. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's easier just to have a dictator and say, this is the way things are. But we don't come up with a good result at the end unless, we're able to kind of absorb a lot of those new things, new ideas.
And can you share your name with us, sir?
Richard Dodge.
Richard Dodge, okay.
Douglas, Arizona.
Would you mute that again, please?
No, I just took the mute off. I'm sorry, I didn't do it right to begin.
There you go. Boy, that sounds like the voice of God if I ever heard one. Okay, so anyone else have any comments? We have about 8 more minutes. And Al, I know you have comments. You're like the Energizer Bunny. Also, there's been some interesting conversation on the chat line, which I'm going to do my best to capture that file as well, so that we can have that a part of the minutes for this meeting. 9 minutes on YouTube. So Steve decided to start typing instead of talking, even though you're unmuted, Steve. Did you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, I was just there were some specific questions here that kind of aren't specifically linked to what we're discussing, and I was answering them. They're also because I was also answering questions from folks from RailPac, so it's kind of almost an internal discussion here. So to keep us focused, I was typing in to keep us focused and on some stuff. So
well, that's good. It'll keep it in the hard version record of this item. If there aren't any other questions, then I suppose we should consider wrapping up this this rail summit from All Aboard Arizona. I want to check with our president to see if that's something. Think it's okay to wrap up? Grab the unit over there. Hang on. The president's going to wrap it up, and hopefully say something clairvoyant when you're ready.
I just want to thank everybody for participating. I think this was a very lively and interesting meeting. I think we covered a lot of ground, and we have a lot of work to do. I would like to extend an invitation to everybody to please, if you can, join All Aboard Arizona. We certainly could use the members, and we're going to plan more of these. Hopefully we'll have a spring passenger rail summit as well. And so we look forward to having you attend that, both either in person, hopefully if the pandemic abates, or via Zoom. Hopefully we'll continue the Zoom practice. I think it's fantastic because it broadens the audience. But I want to thank everybody's participation. There are no bad ideas, and we need to have this dialogue. We need to partner with our friends and our allies and really build momentum for passenger rail. I'd also like to put a pitch in. We have the matching program for the M-Plan. If M-Plan is important, you might as well get the matching program, and All Aboard Arizona is really pushing that. We've got up to $4,000. We're willing to match dollar for dollar. And so we'd like to get as many contributions as possible. And I would point out, if you go to our website, it's possible. I believe it's possible to do that. I think Alan had set that up. So we're excited about that. We're excited about M-Plan. We're excited about the Daily Sunset and getting all the long distance trains back to Daily. Again, thank you so much for your participation. It was a very lively meeting and enjoyable. And stay safe, and thanks for participating.
And I also want to be able to put my 2 cents worth in here, thanking Bruce Ashton for his patience with me over the last few days as we had private tutoring on how to share screen, and he learned something and I learned something. And Al, always a pleasure. You're just a stitch in many old ways that I happen to like, and I was very happy that Ray Lang managed to overcome his technical difficulties, because apparently he logged in and his computer from Amtrak wouldn't let him access the internet. So he did that on his personal computer, which I'm glad he did, so he can make a presence. All right, everyone, thank you so very much. And if with that,